What is going on, Rotogrinders? Dean here. That's Dean 7904 if you want to get all technical on me. It is 10:10 on the East Coast, 7:10 on the West Coast, 9:10 Tennessee time. Of course, image of time of the flagship show here at Rotogrinders. It's called Grinderslive. It is the start of 3 straight hours, taking you guys all the way up the lock for NFL Week 5. I rounded up 2 hours, 50 minutes. That doesn't sound nearly as fun. Joining me today, as usual, living out his greatest fantasies there in Colorado, the chalk donkey himself, Grant Neefer. What's going on, dude?
Oh, I'm going to be super chalky today for the first time all year. Gosh, I just done love those Giants.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to play all the Giants. What, 22 team total? That's what the Dallas defense will do. We'll talk about that, obviously, in a second. And, that's kind of sort of where we're at as far as the slate.
It's not the defense isn't the reason why.
Oh, you think the Giants have a really good offense?
That's also not the reason why.
Okay, what's the reason why? Prices, I assume?
Price, pace. And yeah. I was trying to think of another P, and all that came to mind was punch you in the peen.
Well, that's 2 Ps, and both are inappropriate. And also, you can't reach from there, thankfully. Let's bring in somebody who's much more classy. You know him from the Six Pack. It's Beer Makers fan, Chris Prince. What's going on, dude?
I mean, I don't know about that. Maybe more classy than Grant. That's a low bar, but never did
That is a low bar.
Never did I think we'd start a show talking about punching you in the junk and the New York Giants. I mean, that's our big intro to everybody come in and listen to us here.
What's up, YouTube? Like, subscribe. You know the whole deal. Get comfortable. We're here for the next 3 hours. We're just kicking it off. We're the appetizer, if you want to say. Sure, we can do that. Following us is Tambo and Eric Beimfor. Eric Beimfor, of course, you guys are pre-members here at RG. You know him from the Q Hunting Show with Squirrel Patrol. So they're going to talk much more tournament stuff. We'll talk plenty of tournament stuff as well, too. And they're going to be showing off some of the RG tools that we'll be showing off as well. If you want to use those tools at your own leisure, our fabulous multitasking producer, D-Train, Devin's going to go ahead and drop that link in chat if you guys. You get $5 off, 5 smackers off your first month, RG Core 4 Premium. Check that out. We do want to give a couple of shout-outs as well. If you guys are rocking the RG badge, you get the added value of the shout-out. Just sign up, rock the RG badge. The link will be dropped in chat. You finish in the top 10 of certain contests around the industry, you get 1 month free of RG Premium. We got Wagers42, who recently signed up as rocking the RG badge, as well as B. Sandark. So there you go. Click that link. You get to finish top 10 of certain contests, and you get 1 month free of RG Premium. We are down to 10 games this week. If you guys are not aware, I assume you are. Denver, New England are not on the slate. Buffalo and Tennessee not on the main slate. So 10-game main slates today. Not a ton of injuries as far as what we're monitoring. What I have for you, Lamar Jackson didn't practice all week until Friday. He practiced in full with his knee, and he had the fish. He wasn't feeling particularly well, but he is probable, expected to go. Mixon's got that shin, but he's probable. Both San Francisco guys, Mostert and Deebo Samuel, expected to go as well later on. They're both currently probable. Obviously, actives and inactives will confirm an hour and a half before those games start. The big one is Julio Jones, currently questionable with his hamstring. I think that can definitely define the slate to some degree, at least on DK specifically, where Olamide Zaccheaus. I was practicing that name all day.
Well done.
Here.
Well
Did
done.
I do that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I would have butchered it. So, yeah, it sounded good to me. Just call him the Z-Man.
Yeah.
OZ.
I'm sure he's got to have a nickname on the team, right? You'd imagine they're not calling him like and also he's young. You got to give young guys a nickname. But yeah, Olamide Zaccheaus is 3K on DK. And let's talk about the slate just in general before we dive in and break it down position by position, Beer, because one of the reasons why Zaccheaus is interesting to me, besides the fact he's 3K, is that this overall slate, I think it's very, very clear, at least from my perspective, that running backs are much more appealing than receivers. If I could roster 6 running backs and no receivers, I would love to do that. Of course, we can't do that, unfortunately. Do this fantasy draft for that. That'd be nice. Throw at least four running backs. So, what's your attack as far as this slate? Do you agree with me that it's a running back heavy slate as opposed to the talent? As far as I just can't find anything on DK that I just love at receiver, but you got to roster 3 dudes.
Yeah, I'm a little more optimistic about the receivers, but you're right. There's a lot of running backs to play. I think a lot of people are going to hover around the same games like we always see. So to me, it's the same message, finding either ways to get different in those games or finding the games that maybe aren't the first, second, third on the list and look to stack those games. So as we go, we'll go through some of those stacks. I think will be lower owned. There's some great plays I think are going to go overlooked like every week. You're just going to have guys that fall through the cracks here, but plenty of great plays. I think there's some good chalk, and I know Grant's on a lot of that. I think there's some chalk that I'm going to stay away from, and we'll discuss that as we move through the positions. But even though we lost some games and people are bummed about that, again, let's be happy we have football at all. Let's roll with the games we got.
The chat is volunteering Wizard of Oz as a nickname, and also OZ and Ozark.
That's not bad. I like that.
Yeah, but he's got to do something to get a nickname. You can't be like Ofer and have a nickname. I think you can't be the Wizard of Oz if you're like one catch for 12 yards.
Well, maybe he goes Ofer, and he's OZ.
Grant, what is your mode of attack as far as this slate?
All Giants and Cowboys.
You know, it's interesting. I like Zeke, and we'll talk about that game, obviously, position by position, and I guess that's a good segue as far as the quarterbacks, but I'm going to have less of the Cowboys passing offense, and you want the pitches. Like, the Cowboys are not going to continue to be down by 14-21 every single game. They're not going to continue to turn the ball over, 9 times a game, where Dak has to kind of bury him at a hole and throw the ball 50 times. I understand their neutral pace is amazing too. It's the best in football, but I don't think he's going to continuously throw the ball 50 times. And they are, close to a 10-point favorite here against the Giants last I checked. And
it's all the way down to 7.
Okay, fair enough. As it should be, probably, because they probably shouldn't be favored. And they also have offensive line problems. We saw Smith is out for the season. They've had several. They had coming into the year, they had one of the strongest offensive lines projected. And now it looks like one of the more vulnerable ones. And of course, everybody's gonna be on Dallas, and there's some recency bias, and just a lot of goofy things have happened. I'm not discouraging Dallas. I'm not saying they're not good plays. They're all sort of fairly priced. And also, the pie is really – there's a lot of slices for that Dallas side. A lot of guys that can score as opposed to some other teams where, the path is a little bit more direct as far as I can tell. Zeke is my favorite play on Dallas. We'll talk position by position in a second, obviously. But, if you want to know about quarterback, fire out Dak by all means. Tell me Dak's the play.
Dak and Daniel Jones is the play.
Yeah, so – Daniel Jones hasn't scored a touchdown in at least 3 weeks or so. They've had a rough matchup, obviously. Nice matchup, comfortable matchup here versus Dallas. Is it a revenge game for the offensive coordinator for the Giants? Jason Garrett, is that something you're buying into, or just you think it's just the matchup is good enough and who cares?
It's not even so it's a matchup. It is a matchup, but it's not the defensive matchup. It's the matchup overall. Like you said, I don't know what Dallas's game script is going to be. They could end up running the ball, but Dallas is by far the best paced team, situation neutral. Like their actual situations, they're way, way, way above every single other person. But even first half, 22 seconds per play compared to the second place team being 24, and that's Houston. That's still a lot. Like they are running at 19.95 seconds per play. The second closest team overall is not even remotely close to that, with Atlanta at 24. They're going up against the Giants. The Giants are going to pass the ball a lot because guess what? Their offensive line is terrible. They're not going to run the ball. Freeman is not a great running back, but he will be involved in the receiving game. That's beside the point. They're going to be 100 pass attempts in this game. Like that's
too many.
That's too many. How is
maybe
that?
Maybe 90. 100's egregious.
How is that too many? The Dallas, because of all their turnovers, because of how fast they're running and pace, they are throwing the ball a crazy amount of time, even though their actual time of possession is so low because they're chucking the ball so much. Yes, they're going to probably run the ball a little bit more because they haven't been ahead by 7 points the entire season.
All season.
They're one of the only teams to actually do that. But they're going up against the Giants. The Giants don't run the ball. They're going to pass the ball a ton. They're likely to be playing from behind, although I think the Giants end up winning this game. There's going to be 160 plays in this game possibly. Like it's going to be ridiculous here. Both teams are running I can't even remember the exact stats, but neither one of them have a huge time of possession. So we're guaranteed 60 minutes of time of possession going at a very high pace this game with the two teams that pass the ball a ton, which is going to even make more plays. Like this is going to be a massive scoring game here. Can you hear me?
Yeah. You cut out just for a second, but let's let Beer jump in. And, I'm sure Devin has our ownership stuff pulled up there right now. And I'm jumping back and forth as far as FanDuel and DK, Jamino and his team all over this as far as the ownership projections. Obviously, we know the closer and closer to get blocked, the more refined these numbers are. But we are seeing the current ownership projection on both FanDuel and on DK. Prescott is the highest projected quarterback. And Beer, I'm a little bit concerned that I'm not discouraging it. I'm not saying it's a bad play. I'm sure I'm going to have a pinch, but I'm going to have less in the field for sure. And as of right now, my cash games are not landing on Prescott, which is a little bit concerning. But I still think that the opportunities have been immense, and they're not going to be down by 21 every single game or 14 every single game. And sure, they're going to run plenty of plays because they go fast as is, situation neutral. But I don't know. I'm going to have less Prescott, and also that line concerns me to some degree. What are your thoughts here, Beer, as far as Prescott? And you can talk about the Cowboys just in general if you want.
I'm leaning more in your direction, Dean. I'm not disagreeing with what Grant says. It's a great matchup. It is going to be a fast-paced game. The Giants defense, the numbers, they look all right. We think they're a bad defense. They're 11th overall in DVOA defense, and they played some pretty good teams so far. So I don't think it's as much of a cupcake matchup as people are making out to be. Now, it's a good matchup, no doubt, but there are other guys that you can go to. That's my thing. I don't feel like you have to have the Cowboys here. I mean, we have guys like Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. The team total is 33 for Patrick Mahomes, and you're telling me I can get him at half the ownership of what Dak's going to be in tournaments. So cash games, these discussions are irrelevant in my opinion. Play whoever you want. I don't play the ownership game in cash games, but in tournaments, when I can get guys with a similar ceiling in a great matchup as well, when everyone's going to be flocking to one game, I want to go and find some of these other games. And to me, that's Mahomes, that's Lamar on the high end. Watson is in a great spot here as well. I just don't think you have to have Dak this week in tournaments specifically.
Yeah, I just dropped the weather reports currently. Roth is all over it. I imagine he will update this at some point before kickoff at 1 o'clock. Of course, Roth will be on for everybody to watch here on the YouTube at 12:30. He'll be on with Christie and Tuttle. They are closing us out, taking you guys all up to lock. But there is, well, for what it's worth here, Grant, we're seeing orange in Baltimore with plenty of rain. For the Yahoo slate, there's a lot of rain expected there in Seattle, which is the night game. And Washington, there's expected to be a good bit of rain too. I'll let you guys in chat at your own leisure go ahead and read that. But do you care about this at all? And Grant, the other part is with Lamar is that, he roasted Cincinnati twice last season. He should roast him again. He was held out of practice a couple days, but I don't think that's a big issue, especially considering he practiced in full on Friday, and I think he'll be fully unleashed. But, if the field is a mess, maybe that works against his running. I don't know. Thoughts?
I don't care about those teams. All I care about is the Giants and the Cowboys.
Are you just going to say the same thing the entire show? You have to roster other players. No. Yeah, theoretically. Yeah,
I'm not worried about that. Lamar's a running quarterback, so a little bit of rain, weather, that doesn't really change. He's not going to go out there and throw for 400 yards, so the rain is not really going to affect things. It's a great matchup. People are shying away from the weather. He was hurt all week. He's got an illness. Look, I'll take a under 10% on Lamar Jackson, and I know we haven't seen that ceiling. It's still there, and I know he hasn't looked like the MVP, but there's still a big ceiling there, and what are the odds that he outscores Dak Prescott this week? I would say they're fairly high, and you're getting him at way less ownership.
60%?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's a little more expensive, obviously, and within the rule of a salary cap. But did you want to speak? Do you want to elaborate there, Grant, on Daniel Jones? Is it just because he's cheap enough and you like the matchup and you expect a shootout, and that's that?
Yeah, the Dallas defense is not good. The pace of play for Dallas is fantastic. Both teams are 31 and 32 in terms of rushing percentage. Granted, that's just the way it kind of goes considering their situations. But even if you go with neutral game script situations, the run percentage for both these teams is going to be way, way below average. So there's going to be a lot more passing. Daniel Jones in 3 starts so far this year 2 starts this year has over 40 pass attempts. He's faced the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th ranked pass defense, and now he goes up against Dallas, which I think is 26th. It's going to be more pass attempts. It's a much better matchup. People forget how much, this far into the season, we can overreact to how bad a quarterback's been. I mean, look at both the Jets and the Broncos. Granted, I get it was Thursday Night Football, but they had tough matchups every single week, and then they face bad defenses or lackluster defenses, and they end up going off. Daniel Jones has been terrible. First of all, the actual ownership that we have, I am assuming it's going to be a lot lower. I really think that Jones is going to be lower, and I think Dak's going to be lower. I don't think that people are going to trust playing Jones in their lineup. And
you don't move the needle? You're calling out Jamito. Both things are happening?
I mean, Jamito, everyone, when it comes to ownership, is wrong in a certain amount of spots. And Dallas really hasn't been as highly owned as they should be every single week. I think this week is going to be very much the same. So Jones, no touchdowns in the last 3 games, averaging 35 rushing yards per game. So just giving you a little bit of a floor there. And with more plays during the course of the game, because both teams have to have the ball for a total of 60 minutes during the course of the game, he could end up rushing for 55 yards. He's going to have huge positive touchdown regression, and he's going to pass more. Everything sets up perfectly for him here. And Daniel Jones is going for 30 points. Daniel Jones is my favorite quarterback on the slate here. And the wide receivers, just based on volume, are fantastic plays. I get Slayton and Ingram are going to be high on. We'll get to that when we actually get over there.
Can you rank those three? Like who you're most likely to pair? Tate, Slayton, Ingram. You can
it's
roster
Slayton.
up to two,
It's basically what their ownerships are projected at. Slayton, I have 100% ownership in right now over on DK.
Wow.
Ingram, I think I'm at 60, and then Ratley and Tate, I'll probably end up with 25%. Like I'm mixing and matching every single thing I can. I love all of them. Because Ratley, like everyone's going to be on OZ.
I never considered Ratley. He's a person.
He is a person.
he is a person. Today?
He is a person that had 4 targets the last game, 2 the game before, but he's a guy that's going to be moderately involved in the offense at near minimum price. His target percentage, based on how many throws that Jones is going to get, he's only had 35 over the last 2 games on average. And this game, he might go for 45, given 25%, 30% uptick in targets. That's 6 targets there at 3,200 with a chance at a touchdown as a perfect pivot off or near perfect pivot off of OZ. Like this is just
he's OZ now.
Yeah, well,
That's
I don't want to
now.
Yeah, but for quarterbacks, if you're not using them, Watson, Bridgewater, Minshew. If you really want him, or Kyle Allen, you can just straight up punt it. But as of right now, I have 1 Watson lineup, and the rest are Daniel Jones or Prescott.
Yeah, speaking of OZ, I know not our receivers, but like if Julio does dress, there's a person I just learned existed last week. You mentioned that Jet game. Jeff Smith is a person who's 3K. He seems like the logical pivot. Of course, ownership and game theory and things like that at 3K and TK. You can sort of factor that in. But jump in here, Beer, as far as these the next tier of quarterbacks, because Watson, they got rid of Bob. He only called the plays last week for what it's worth, but it's a nice matchup here against Jacksonville. And one of the things I was pointing out, letting Watson cook, and I don't know if his ingredients are good. Russ has real ingredients. Watson's got Fuller and then a bunch of retreads that are just no longer any good. Of course, Watson can run, but they haven't let him run all year either for some reason. I don't know why. And then you got Teddy Bridgewater in this amazing matchup in a dome against Atlanta. Terrible defense, should be a bit of a shootout. And he's fairly cheap, especially on DK at 5'9", 7'1" on FanDuel. I like him a good bit. 295 yards is his prop today. As far as his passing yards, that feels, it's one of the top 2 or top 3 on the board, just yard specific. Where are you at on those two, Beer, as far as Watson and as far as Bridgewater? Because both those guys are in the mix for me.
Well, first of all, I want to go back to Daniel Jones as far as the ownership and Dak. I think if you work backwards, the high ownership on Slayton, on Ingram, on some of these other weapons is just going to lead people to build those stacks. We know the DFS universe a lot smarter now. They're stacking, they're double stacking, they're running it back. This is the new age. So that's what's going to keep those guys highly owned. So I do think it's accurate. You're going to see Dak, you're going to see Daniel Jones. So that's why I mentioned the pivots. On the high end, we don't need to spend time on Mahomes, Lamar. Easy. I do love Deshaun Watson here. I mean, the guy put up 24 DraftKings points last week, Dean, and it's like it was a disappointment. Everyone's like, he was terrible. So we haven't seen that ceiling game. You mentioned we haven't seen him run. What better matchup is there than Jacksonville? I mean, this defense is absolutely terrible. I don't mind the stacking pieces. I'm going to bang my head against the wall. I'm going to go back to Brandon Cooks. He's down to 4,100. You can go at Will Fuller. I'm even playing some David Johnson. I've kind of stayed out of that water, but going to dip my toe in there a little bit. And then the Jacksonville side of things. I mean, I love Robinson. We're going to get to running backs. Chark looked great in his return. Chenault is getting more involved here. So I think that game's stackable. You could even go with a Minshew stack and run it back with the Will Fuller. I agree with Bridgewater. I think he's in a good spot. You can go with Anderson, Moore, or both, and we'll get to those guys. And I don't mind a little Kyle Allen on DraftKings.
Oh, here it is.
I mean, 4,100 is cheap. You know who to stack them with. That's the beauty. Some of these guys you got to try to guess, which one of the pieces is going to be. It's McLaurin, and I know he's going against Ramsey, but he's played well against a lot of good corners. Will Ramsey even shadow him the whole game? And I don't mind mixing Gibson in there either, who's involved in the passing game. So a cheap way. If you want to load up on some of those running backs, that could be a way to get a little bit different there.
What is the number I have to give you? And I'm sure this is DK specific, where he's 4.1K, correct? Just to clarify.
Yes.
As far as
yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Just because the price is so obscene. I don't know why they're even putting him in there. Why not develop the young guy? It's a lost season anyway, but whatever. It's not worth talking about. It is what it is. Allen's the starting quarterback right now. What do I have to give you? Because the traditional, 3x, that's out the window for a guy that's 4.1K.
Right.
Yeah,
That's not enough.
That whole sort of that's kind of archaic. It's a whole other conversation. But for me, that's not the way I think about things. You got to lock in a certain number of points. What do you have to get to justify that roster spot? 17,
Are we talking tournaments?
20? Tournaments. 20?
I need 20 because Dak, Lamar, Mahomes, these guys are going to put up, 30, 35 points. So 15, 16 is not going to get me there. If he gets me 20, and I'm hitting on all my higher end guys, now I'm in there. But 12, 15 is not going to be enough. Cash games, yeah, you take the 12, 15 and move on, and it lets you get all the studs. But 20 plus in tournaments, no doubt. Can he get there? Probably not. I'm not overly crazy on it, but I will have a few lineups with him, no doubt.
Yeah, I like that Rams defense, especially on Yahoo, where he's $15. The Rams are $15, $5 above the floor against Allen in the muck, or to some degree that field's going to be messed up. Grant, we got the old friend Bobby in the chat talking about. I thought for sure he was prepping for you to give the Kyle Allen sales pitch. Is that not for you today? You're just hitting the lock button and that Dallas Giant came moving on as far as quarterbacks?
Yeah, it's not on DraftKings. On other random sites, I will be using quite a bit of him, but yeah, no, on DraftKings. Like, I'm just too all in on Jones and Prescott. Like, I think both of them go for 30 plus.
In the chat, they're saying Haskins is leaving DC according to local media today. I don't mean like leaving today, or when is he even a free agent? Is he opting out? I have no idea what's going on there, but that's interesting. It just seems weird that they would pull. I know he's not been good.
He can't be a free agent. He was a rookie last year, so
yeah, I'm confused. And nobody's trading for him. I don't know.
And look what happened with Josh Rosen.
What happened with Josh Rosen?
You not remember? He got traded.
He
got benched.
Sports, Grant. All I care about is today and today only. They're asking about Minshew, and that's your guy normally, Grant. You have any thoughts as far as Minshew? And I know Beer likes him too sometimes.
I mean, I have no problem playing Minshew. The problem is they tend to spread out the offense. I'm more on Robinson. Minshew's fine. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but Houston is terrible against the run so far this season, and they're just going to probably continue to be terrible versus the run. So I'd much rather go with Robinson because I don't know who to pair Minshew with. Like, yes, there's Chark, but I'm just going the running route there. I think Jacksonville may end up winning this game, and there's a lot of different ways this game can go. So I'm very high on Robinson today, so that's why I'm not really going too much Minshew.
They're saying trade rumors in chat, which I don't know. I just can't imagine what you're getting for him at this point.
Strong expectations. Haskins gets traded before the deadline.
Okay. I mean, what does he get? Well, I'm just curious what he gets traded for. Can't be much. And he was a first rounder, so what's the point? But all right. Jimmy G's coming back today. I think he's kind of sort of someone interesting as a pivot. And you kind of sort of know who to play him with as well, too. And there's some guys on Miami you can run it back with if you think that game could potentially shoot out, which I think it can, because that San Francisco defense is beat up to some degree. Kind of a sneaky shootout. Any other quarterbacks that are worth diving into, or shall we talk about running backs? Who's got anything?
You don't need anyone but Dak or Jones.
And Houston Jacksonville is my Giants Dallas for Grant. I do like both sides of that game. I prefer Watson. I agree completely. I'm going to have a ton of James Robinson, but I don't hate that Minshew stack and running it back the other way. So that's the game that I'll be attacking and stacking a bunch of different ways. Outside of that, Jimmy G's fine. I just don't think you need to go there today. There's enough options that we talked about. I don't think there's anyone else that I'm playing. I think Grant's in the same boat. So let's move on.
Also, according to the chat, this is not today's, but apparently Chris Middleton was traded for Paul George, or am I just being punked here? I don't know. Beer, that's a big story for you as a Bucs fan.
That's my squad. I don't know how I feel about that.
I don't know if it's true or not. If you want to believe Fear Money.
Does Paul George play point guard? Is my question.
I don't know. All right. Well, let's talk about some running backs. Get back to football. Running back is so strong today, in my opinion. I think that's your flex play, of course, in tournaments. Immediately, if you want to be different, just play a receiver in your flex, and you're different already. I think it's pretty clear that the pool of running backs are better than the pool of receivers. Beer, open it up for us, because I think from a cash game perspective on FanDuel, on DK, I think it's just Zeke, Mike Davis, and CEH. I think that's the kind of sort of pretty obvious. There's other routes you can go, and David Johnson's cheap enough in some spaces where you can justify it, open up some money. Really like James Conner, especially for tournaments. Hunt as well, too. We'll talk about that and how much of that backfield he's actually going to get. We shall see, because last week he was kind of goofy, but there was a bit of a blowout, and he was dealing with a groin, so maybe that's why he wasn't just taking over, but also he can just, line up as at receiver when he's not lining up a running back as well too. Are you with me, Beer? Cash game perspective. It's Zeke, Davis, and CEH. Lock those three in. Is Beer with me? Am I frozen? Is somebody frozen?
I don't think you're frozen.
I'm here.
Oh, what just happened? Beer.
He asked you a question, sir, and I understand the need to just disregard whatever Dean says. But
I did not hear the question, so I don't know if
Mike Davis, CH, Elliott.
Those are definitely that's your cash game right there. Those three. Now tournaments, there's always the case. We've seen it week in, week out of going away from the highly owned running backs has been profitable, and you're going with Mixon last week. So to me, these guys are in good spots, but maybe the passing game gets it done. Maybe it is Dak with 4 touchdowns and Zeke gets left out. Maybe it is Mahomes going nuts and CEH doesn't find the end zone. Maybe it is Bridgewater to Moore and Anderson. So tournaments, I'm looking to go a different direction. I mean, these guys are all going to be 30, 35, 40% owned, and there's other guys we can go to. We talked about David Johnson, I like a lot. I love James Conner here, who just continues to go overlooked, and a workhorse running back, home favorite. Philadelphia, sure, they're decent against the run, but they're middle of the road. So he's a guy that I'm very high on. Robinson, like we talked about, getting a ton of work against a terrible Houston defense. So it's another week where it's easy to be different in tournaments, just pivoting off these highly owned running backs. Get your exposure in your cash games and in your 3-5 mans. And I'm not saying you have to fade them completely. I mean, if you want to work 1 or 2 of these guys in, but you start with that build of those 3 guys, your lineup's going to be duplicated. I promise you that.
Apparently, we just got like our first like. I don't want to stoop. I don't want to stoop. I don't want to beg. I'll leave that for Grant. But we just got our first like 20 minutes into the show, and that's depressing. So if you guys can help us out, we'd much appreciate that. Try to beat the algorithm, hit the like, hit the subscribe, the whole deal. All right, we're above 1 apparently. The chat was telling me, and now I'm reading the chat. Dean is so gullible. I'll just read anything. I'm Ron Burgundy. Yeah. So Grant, fine tooth coming here as far as Zeke, as far as like Mike Davis. It says backfield there against Atlanta. Atlanta is yielding a ton of passes this year to running backs, as they did last year as well too. And it says backfield. It says world because their only backup running back is a dude that just called from the practice squad, and there's a fullback that's lurking as well too. And I suppose Curtis Samuel can get some carries, but Mike Davis is, still not as expensive enough for the amount of usage he's going to get. We talked about that Kansas State total there against the Raiders. CEH Allaire, he's still too cheap, far as I can tell, and he's going to get a big chunk and massive favorite, 35 total. Can you sort of like rank your favorite running backs? And you talk about that Dallas game from a passing perspective. Zeke catches the ball a lot too. Give me your running backs.
Yeah, so first, someone mentioned that Josh Allen's on pace with 66 touchdowns. It's a good stat. I enjoy that stat.
Yeah, it's not useful today.
It's not, but I just wanted to say I enjoy it. So you get off topic more than anyone. I can do what I want. I'm an adult. But yeah, ranking my running backs. Number 1, Mike Davis. I don't care. Like, he's going to get there. They use him a ton in the red zone. Atlanta defense isn't good. He's heavily involved in the passing game. Mike Davis, I have no problem just fully locking him in. I think I have him in 70% of lineups right now, but it might go up to 100. CH is number 2. Again, he's just getting a ton of workload. This is the best spot he's had all year. He's drastically underpriced.
You're just hitting the opto button today, basically. Is that what you're doing?
You said rank my running backs. I'm going to give you 6.
I'm hearing an optimizer lineup is all I'm hearing, but go ahead.
Zeke's actually number 5. Number 3, Antonio Gibson.
Okay.
The guy, yeah, there you go. Not opto. Antonio Gibson, he's only 5K. He's been heavily involved in the offense. He's been getting more entrenched in the offense. New quarterback there who likes to dump the ball off. He's been involved in the passing game. Had 80 reception yards last week, and that's a stat for you. But Antonio Gibson is in a fantastic spot. He's going to go drastically under owned. Number 4, James Robinson, not James Conner, although he's probably number 7. James Robinson. Houston's run defense is terrible. They're going to probably have him heavily involved in the passing game and the running game. I don't think Houston ends up winning this, so the game script should be pretty good for him. I know Jacksonville's a 5-point dog, but Houston is just a mess. New coach could change that. I don't care. I'm using a ton of Robinson. Number 5, David Johnson. New head coach. He's going to run the ball a bit, but he's probably going to rely on David Johnson more in the passing game than there has been this year. This was a guy that had 80 receptions one year, his second year in the league. He didn't get used as heavily in this Houston pass offense so far this year. The head coach gone might be different, but he's also only 5.2K, drastically underpriced. Then it's Zeke.
Are you
then
concerned? I don't but are you concerned that he lost a market share to Duke Johnson coming back last week, and Bill O'Brien had to kind of sort of justify that trade for David Johnson, and of course he's now gone, and David Johnson's been fine, he's been okay, and the price is adjusted on DK where he's cheap enough, and you can stack him with that Houston defense as well too. Houston's pretty cheap as well if you want to do that correlation. But the loss of carries, does that concern you, or I guess not so much?
Not a ton, especially when I'm getting him at 5.2K at under 15% ownership. Like, doesn't really matter to me a lot. It's definitely a little bit of a hindrance. I wouldn't be surprised if new head coach coming in, maybe they end up throwing both Duke Johnson and David Johnson in there. Again, the Houston wide receiving core has been just trash so far this year. But Jacksonville is the worst team by far against the pass. They're bad against the run. They were the worst team by far against the run last year. They haven't really had to have that exploited too much so far this season, but I don't care. Like, David Johnson is fantastic. And then I like Beer's call on Connor. Like I was talking about, he's a guy that's going to come in at very low ownership, and it's his backfield still. Philly's a tough run D, but doesn't matter to me. So, yeah, you want me to rank it? It's Mike Davis, it's CEH, it's Antonio Gibson, James Robinson, David Johnson, and then Zeke is my sixth guy.
All right, Beer. First of all, question in chat. They're talking about Lev Bell. I can't get excited about Lev Bell. Maybe he comes back and gets 25 touches. I suppose that's possible. But I suppose he'll definitely be low owned as well too. Back off the IR. They're asking about D'Ernest Johnson. It was great last week against Dallas, and that was when Hunt was kind of dinged. I think he had like 13 carries for 90-something yards, and they were basically waxing Dallas, and it was kind of sort of garbage time. Jump in here, Beer. Give your thoughts as far as Hunt. Like, what do you think? How much does he jump up as far as his usage? And when he's not carrying the ball, is he going to be on the field in the slot out there to catch? I love him. The most I like him the most is on Yahoo, where he's like $17 or $18, which is a really good deal over there. You can certainly play him on FanDuel and DK as well, but a little bit less appealing compared to the field. What say you?
I really like him this week. I know it's a hot button topic. Some people are out, some people are in. They're worried about the other guys. He's going to carry the work here. I think at least 70%. Yes, Johnson will work in. Hilliard will get some of the passing game work, but a lot of people, this Indianapolis defense is good, and I do believe that, but they're missing their entire linebacking core, and look at some of the teams they face. So yes, they're good, but are they that good? Are they elite where I have to give up on Kareem Hunt here in a great matchup? So I actually love the pairing, Dean, of Kareem Hunt with the Browns defense. I mean, Phillip Rivers can be a turnover machine at times. So
they're without their best left tackle or right tackle. The one that gets Myles Garrett, I believe, they're without. So that could be a problem.
Right. So that's a pairing I don't think a lot of people are going to go to. I like that. I agree on the David Johnson call in that mid-range. Robinson, like I mentioned, Connor. And I'm going Todd Gurley today. And I know he's become – this is more so on FanDuel, for them touchdowns. But would it shock us to see Todd Gurley score 3 touchdowns against this team? So I hate counting on touchdowns, but there will be points scored in that game. He's not a zero in the passing game, so he can help you there. And I do think this could be a shootout here. So as ugly as it is, I agree. Sometimes we got to get in the mud, though. It's gross. But Todd Gurley on FanDuel, I'm locking him in.
We got Killa B in the chat. He's talking about Josh Jacobs being one of the best leverage plays. And, yeah, you got to assume he's going to be playing catch-up there versus Kansas City. Kansas City is more apt to just give up, rushing yards. Now, Jones is back for KC for what it's worth, their defensive lineman. But Jacobs is just, good at football, and he's going to get a ton of targets. He's going to be off the board. I'm trying to find his ownership right now. I imagine
15%. He's the 5th highest owned guy.
Yeah, I think I'll take the under on that. I think David Johnson will be more heavily owned. Maybe I'm wrong just because that price on Jacobs. So 6.3 on DK is pretty reasonable. Who wants to sell me? Is anybody a buy or sell Jacobs?
He's fine. I just don't have him in my player pool right now.
Why is he not in the player pool?
Because I like 6 other guys more.
How many lineups are you making today?
Between all sites, I don't know, 200.
Okay. Is he in your player pool, Beer?
Yeah, I like him as a running back option. If I'm going Kansas City, that's where I'll use him, hoping they can keep the game close. To me, it's him and or Darren Waller in them stacks. So FanDuel, the beauty is nobody's going to want to pay $8,200 for him, so you're going to get him low in there. DraftKings, he's cheap. I mean, $6,300, and if he can get involved in the passing game, they can keep this game close. I'd love that stack there. So outside of the stack, I don't think I want to go there because there are 8-9 guys I would rather play, but run it back with Kansas City. I have that in a ton of lineups today.
They're asking about Chris Carson and the Yahoo slate. There's such good values at running back that it was hard for me to get there. I think I got a little sprinkle because I entered their big contest a bunch of times. I used the RG tool. How about that? They're going to be showing that off in the next show. They're going to be jumping in here. It's going to be Tambo and Eric Bimeford. I believe they're going to be coming in 20 after or something like that. Yeah, I think it takes a few minutes for them to set the show up. But, yeah, you guys can check that as well, too. I'm sure they'll have all sorts of conversations from a Twitter perspective. But, yeah, the Yahoo running back prices are really, really good. I talked about Hunt being too cheap over there. David Johnson's got a pretty good price. And, man, I'm trying to remember who the other cheap running back was, too. I wish I could think of it. But Marquise Brown is $15. There you go. He's a receiver, I know, but $5 above the floor. James Conner, I like a good bid. He's got a nice price over there at Yahoo as well, too. And if he's only going to be, 8% owned, he checks all the boxes, doesn't he, Grant? James Conner, as a home favorite. He's got a chance at 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. And why don't we like Conner? Is he just a victim of the slate? There's too many other good running back options.
Yeah.
All right. Dynamite dropping.
Hard hitting analysis there. I'm high on him. I really like him here. Again, like you said, it's all the boxes we want. Home favorite, a good matchup here. I think Pittsburgh can control this game. A great pairing with the Pittsburgh defense. So another one of those correlations. So I'm a big fan. So a lot of Connor for me today.
Anybody else as far as running backs that are worth talking about? I see they're asking about Drake. It feels like Edmonds is pushing him, and Edmonds looks like the better back for what it's worth. It's the NFL. Week to week, goofy things happen, and maybe Drake can take a stand and just say, this is my backfield. But, I didn't get there. It wouldn't shock me if he broke off a big one. He can do that. That's in his bag. But if he does, I'm in trouble because I don't have any.
I have a little bit. Just feels like one of those spots where he will smash, so I'm mixing in a little bit. The other situation, I was pretty high on Jerick McKinnon, but with Mostert back.
Same.
Any thoughts there? Because I don't know that I want to play Mostert. I worry about – I know McKinnon will be the passing downs back, but kind of loses some of his luster with all these other running backs. So you guys got any thoughts there? With San
Isn't
Francisco?
Mostert just guaranteed an 80-yard touchdown every week?
Yeah, so that's the problem.
But he gets 9 touches sometimes. So, I don't
Well,
know.
if one of those touches is worth, what, 14 points? That's at least 14 points.
You can't assume an 80-yard touchdown.
It's happened in 100% of the games this year.
Oh,
that he's played in.
I was with Beer. I liked McKinnon under the assumption that Mostert may be out, and it looks like he's going to play. That's the late game. Got to make sure he's going to be locked in. But and they're 8-point favorites. I assume if he was dinged, that they would just sit him out another week. Why not? But yeah, they're both playable. They're both in the pool, but they obviously eat at each other, and it makes both less ideal. Is there anybody else that's worth talking about the running back position, or shall we talk about receivers, which is, I don't know, pretty meh for me?
Slayton's a wide receiver, so how could it be meh?
You like Slayton chalk? That's such a – I'm playing some too, and I'm not happy about it, but I don't like the idea of Slayton chalk. Darius Slayton is currently the highest projected receiver right now on DK, 4.8K versus that Dallas defense, 27% ownership. Again, this stuff gets more and more refined the closer we get to lock, but I don't know. That doesn't get me excited.
It gets me excited because I've got 4x the field on him pretty much.
That's bad math. That'd be over 100%.
I said pretty much.
Oh, fair enough.
Yes, I didn't say exactly. I didn't say more than. I said pretty much.
I said with all due respect.
Yeah, but wide receiver really isn't that bad. So you got some of the Houston options that are gonna. So someone's gonna hit. Jacksonville's that bad against the pass. Someone's gonna end up hitting. We got Slayton being the top guy in terms of ownership, and you should just lock him in. So far this season, he had 6 targets in every single matchup. He is playing in a dome this week, which is going to help Daniel Jones and him quite a bit. His target percentage his target should go up this week because Daniel Jones is going to throw the ball more. He has a chance at a 2-touchdown game pretty much any given week. I think this is the spot he's going up against a much, much, much worse defense today than he has pretty much all season long. Pittsburgh's fantastic. Chicago's fantastic. San Francisco's fantastic. Rams are fantastic against the pass. So Slayton's getting a much better matchup with much better pace, and it's in a dome. So everything kind of leads to him being 4.8K. I'm fully eating that chalk. Robbie Anderson chalk, not eating as much, but I still like it. Amari Cooper chalk, absolutely eat it. But the rest of the pieces in this Dallas-New York game are not projected to be terribly highly owned. Golden Tate, I think, is projected it's 7%, and he's getting a large amount of targets every single week. He always has that big touchdown equity. No one's had touchdown equity on Giants because they just haven't scored in the last 3 weeks, but they are going to today. It's going to happen. Giants are going to win. So taking him or Ratley is not a bad call. Evan Ingram is still getting a massive target share in this offense. We haven't gotten to tight end yet, but I'm just saying lock him in. Outside of them, Deontay Johnson is a good play here. He's not projected to be very highly owned, and that's just a mistake.
I think he will be on FanDuel where he's got a more appealing price, I think.
I mean, he might end up, but who knows?
15%, 5.8K. He's got a good price on DK too. I actually like that's one of my favorite plays today by default at receiver. Where are we seeing his ownership on DK? I think it's is it mid? Well, you guys see that? I'm scrolling and I can't find him for some reason, but maybe that's.
I think he's around 7%, 8%.
All right, that's kind of surprising. Beer, talk to me about this, the Carolina receivers, and Grant, retroactively, you were correct on this last week, so good call. I'll give you the props.
Suck it, Dean.
Well, I'm telling you right now on air, I'll take the L, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I was telling you to suck it.
Well, I mean,
while taking the L.
Yeah, so the Anderson DJ Moore thing, and it just feels like it might flip-flop, who knows? And those guys are basically running different routes they did in previous seasons. Anderson's now running the safer routes. Moore is running the less safe routes. They're basically the same price on DK. Beer, what do I do with these guys? Who's the better play?
I think it's DJ Moore this week. I've been waiting for the ownership to fall on him. Each and every week he's been 20, 25% owned. This is finally the week. People are kind of going more towards a Robbie Anderson. So I like them both, and I don't hate the double stack there with Bridgewater, but I'm going to go DJ Moore this week, Dean.
You have a thought on that, Grant?
It's like Robbie Anderson is a better play overall if we're not incorporating ownership, but the fact that he's going to be over twice as highly owned as DJ Moore just makes it a DJ Moore week.
Ridley got goose egg last week. Is it a good thing or a bad thing for Ridley if Jones does not play? If you want to play Ridley, because you can make both arguments. He's going to get more, covered more. He can't really hide with Julio on the field, and maybe they kind of open things up when he was kind of crushing the first few weeks, and then. Or if Julio's out there, he might get some targets and take targets away. So maybe it's efficiency versus volume. Beer, what do you prefer if you're playing Ridley?
I prefer Julio in. People would probably play some Julio. He would take away some of the coverage, be more of a decoy, in my opinion. So I think that would help with Ridley, with the ownership, with the defensive attention. So I'd rather him in. I don't think he plays. I don't know why they would risk it. Maybe they get desperate.
They're 0-4.
They need a win, right? Maybe that's the reason they get him out there. But I would rather him in.
If Julio doesn't play, do we like Olamide Zaccheaus for 3K on DK in cash?
In cash, sure. In tournaments, I think it's an easy stay away. I mean, yeah, he looked good last week, but Ridley did nothing. Gage hardly did anything. There's still Hayden Hurst, Gurley in the running back. So I don't know that he's going to get 8 targets again. This game turns into a shootout, sure, but if he's going to be highly owned, that's an easy fade for me in tournaments.
Kansas City's got a monster total. I think Tyreek's getting ignored to some degree. Marquise Brown, I talked about Yahoo specifically, where he's $15. I like his price other places too. And, his numbers would look so much better if he didn't get stopped at the 1 2 times so far this year. And that's just goofy variance. And I hate saying he's due, but some positive regressions coming the way of Marquise Brown. And I like him a good bit today, especially on Yahoo. And then, is DeAndre Hopkins not going to get played much on this slate? That's weird to me. I'm going to play him well more than the field, especially on DK.
Yeah, we did not talk Kyler in the quarterback section. I mean, that shows you what. So I love that stack as kind of a pivot off of some of the higher owned running backs. Spend up at receiver, get Kyler in there. So that's a stack I really like. The problem is, who in the hell you run it back with on the Jets? I mean, I'm not on Love Bell today. I guess Crowder could do some damage here, but yeah, I agree, Dean. Paying up there on Hopkins makes a lot of sense.
You run it back with Jeff Smith.
Yeah,
who's a person.
Yeah.
Hey, we got Philippi in the chat talking about Sammy Watkins. Yeah, he exists. I've seen a proof of life. He's done some things on a football field. Sammy Watkins, again, you get a piece of that KC offense for a really cheap price, and he's traditionally not a guy that people want to roster. But I do agree. Look, I don't love the receivers today, and if I can get in and out fairly cheap and spend money elsewhere on positions I actually like, and I think Sammy Watkins is going to be okay. He can certainly sneak in the box. He's had some, inside the 20 looks. He's getting like a 18-20% share as far as targets. He's not just worthless out there. Obviously, he's not Kelsey, and he's not the first option or the second option. But we don't know a salary cap, and he's fairly cheap in the 4Ks. He's one of the guys that can kind of sort of make things work. Thoughts on Watkins, Grant, and like all the other guys we kind of threw out there. Anybody do anything for you?
I mean, do any of them play for Dallas or New York?
I believe we already discussed those guys.
Did we discuss Gallup?
Do you like Lamb?
I like Gallup. I
love Lamb. I love Gallup. I mean, it's a perfect way to pivot off of Cooper. Yes, Cooper has had massive amount of targets in every single game, but Dak's also throwing the ball 50 times. There's a chance that he ends up targeting other guys. There's any number of ways the game can go. And if Dak's going to throw the ball 50 plus times in this game, then there's 50 plus targets to go around. There's no guarantee that Lamb's going to get the same target share that he's been getting all season long. It could be Lamb. It could be Gallup. We've all seen Gallup put up massive games just randomly. Yes, even Wilson could end up, but CeeDee Lamb and Gallup I'm probably higher on than I am Cooper, just because there's other guys that you can pivot off of Cooper to. You got Ridley, you got Tyreek, you got a lot of other guys that are at the same or slightly more. Hopkins can absolutely outscore him. Cooper's going to come in at 20% ownership, while Gallup and CeeDee are going to come in at 6-7% ownership. So I really like them. I mean, I'm pretty much all my wide receivers are either Texas or Houston's guys, Dallas guys, or New York guys.
Hey, they're asking about, this is going to put your Dallas love to the test here, Grant. They're asking about Tony Pollard. That's just too thin for me. He had a good game last time in garbage time, but you can't bank on that, especially where running back is really strong and there's a big opportunity cost. That's a no-go for me.
No, not using him. And someone says, I don't believe Dak is throwing 50 times against the Giants. I think
I'll take the under on 50. He can, but I'll take the under on 50.
Wonder what his passing. What do you think his passing attempts prop is?
I don't. Well, I'm going to say actual yards. Passing yards prop is probably like 315, 320. Is that a fair number? You tell me.
I think it's 325, if I remember correctly. I'm checking it right now because I live in a legal state. Hooray me!
Yeah, I can look at it, but I can't. I can only browse. I'm just browsing here.
Just window shopping.
Yeah, I can't purchase, unfortunately. I'm not in the correct states. Beer. What other receivers have we not discussed? Who should we talk about? Who's in the mix for you? How do we get different? And before you say that, give me your favorite two receivers in that New York-Dallas game.
I'm more staying away from that game, Dean. I'm not eating the Slate and chalk cash game, sure, but he's going to be pretty highly owned on DraftKings, so I'm going to stay away from that. I love Gallup there as the guy just to get different. Nobody's going to want to play him. The other guys are clearly better plays, but the ownership is going to reflect that as well. So I'll go Gallup there. I love the Houston and Jacksonville game. So pretty much using all those guys. Fuller going back to Brandon Cooks, who gets another good matchup here. Chenault and Chark, I mentioned. You mentioned Hollywood Brown. I love that. I think this is a great matchup for him. So I have plenty of him today. Love the Watkins call. So those are the main guys for me. I'm heavy on that Houston-Jacksonville game this week.
Let's see in the chat. There's something else interesting in the chat that kind of popped for me. And now
FYI, Prescott at 39.5 over under.
Yeah, he might go over that, but he's not. I mean, he's less likely to go hit 50, obviously. Like we've seen it before, but goofy things have happened.
We've seen it before. We've seen it before every single week so far this season. Outside
of
week
been
one,
down by 3 touchdowns every single week because he turned the ball for 3 times in the first half every single week. Like that's not going to continue going forward.
Disagree.
All right, this
is literally like the best scenario for them to run more plays. They're playing at a massive pace, and now they're going up against the Giants, who are about the middle of the pack in terms of pace, but they also run the ball at the lowest rate in the league.
You want a guy that's going to their offensive line concerns me a little bit too, for what it's worth. I'll give you a guy that's going to be like 3% owned and nobody's going to play. That has a nice matchup. Juju Smith-Schuster. Like people just forgot he exists. Like that could be a separator in tournaments. I think he's super interesting, and I want to go out of my way to make sure I get some shares of that. We got to talk some tight ends. Unless you have anything else, Beer. there's actual opportunity cost at tight end this week. We have all three big boys are playing: Kittle, Kelsey, Andrews. You probably can't get away with the tight end that scores 0 points and still cash, which I know I have. I'm sure many other people, like the optimal lineups are hitting sometimes or taking down tournaments with zeros essentially. That's probably not going to happen this week. What are you doing at tight ends?
Pretty limited pool for me here. I know there's a lot of studs and guys on the slate, but I got a lot of Darren Waller. I expect that team to be playing from behind the majority of the game. This Kansas City defense can definitely be had. So you talk about 50 passing attempts. That's going to be Derek Carr. And yes, Henry Ruggs is back. He's not going to command 10, 11 targets like Waller will. So love him. Love Kelsey on the other side of that game. I mean, he's had some huge games against this Raiders team over the course of his career. So those are the main two guys for me. You can work in Kittle. I like Kelsey a little bit better. I like saving on Waller. I don't mind a flyer here or there and a guy like Eric Ebron. I do like Dalton Schultz a lot. That's another way to get different in that Giants-Dallas game. I think he should be more heavily owned than he is going to be. So those are the main guys for me. A lot of Waller, a lot of Kelsey, and mixing in Schultz and Ebron.
Grant, no pressure. We got Quinn West here in the chat said, listen to Grant last week and won, so I'm going to him again. I'm going to say it's recency bias, small sample size, but okay, sure. Congratulations to Quinn. And,
it's literally 25% of the slate so far this year.
Good ROI there.
So no pressure, Grant, but what are you doing at tight end? And obviously the Schultz we've heard, Evan Ingram seems like a positive target there for the Giants. And, he's not really a tight end. He's only kind of a tight end in name, but the A-dot kind of sucks. But if he racks up a bunch of catches, we'll take down DK as well. Your favorite tight end in that Dallas Giant game, and then how about off the board?
Favorite tight end in the Dallas Giant game is Evan Ingram. So far this season, 7 targets, 8 targets, 5 targets, 10 targets. I don't care what his A-dot is. Yes, it's been a different matchup than he's had all season, going up against Dallas, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, Pittsburgh, all high quality pass defenses. Dallas, not so much. Plus, again, more plays. Ingram's probably going to come in at 12 targets in this matchup. I don't care if his A-dot is low. He has a chance at a touchdown. Full point PPR. Absolutely love him. He's going for 20 points today because everyone in that game is going for tons of points. He's a guy that's in pretty much all of my lineups. Kittle, Kelsey are fine. Schultz is a good play. Waller's a good play. If you want to go slightly off the board, then really all I've got is Herndon and Logan Thomas.
Well, Ben, just to give counterpoint, and give both sides, Ben listened to Grant last week, and he drove his car into a river. But he's going to go back to you. So how about that? There you go.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you're looking at fantasy scores while driving. I understand it. I've driven into a river or two.
Don't do that. Don't be on your app and drive. It's a terrible idea.
When I drove into a river, it was a golf cart, and I wasn't the one driving.
Okay, fair enough. But you took down you won $15K last week, and what are the exotic sites? What site you take down?
Super Draft.
There you go. Yeah, you're in all the different streets in the DFS world.
I play them all. Them all.
I've heard some people throw out Chris Herndon, and it's not me if you've heard this before, but Flacco historically leans on his tight ends, and Arizona historically is vulnerable to the tight end. If you can stomach it, I suppose. In theory,
the flow chart, Dean, at 3.2%. The flow chart.
That's what the kids call it. Logan Thomas, in theory, you'd think he catch some dump offs there versus Allen, and I know he's appeared on the buy low model, Hermsmeyer. At least he has in weeks past. I'm not sure if he was on it this week, to be honest. Is there anything else here as far as tight end that's worth talking about?
Eric Ebron.
Yeah, I don't hate that one. I don't hate that one.
You don't hate the guy that somehow seems to get targeted in the red zone with the Colts way too often last year?
Yeah, well, he's on a different team now. He changed uniforms, right?
Yeah, yeah. Big Ben likes to throw to tight ends, and he's had 7 targets and 5 targets the last 2 weeks. He does have a touchdown. Suck it, Dean.
And a team getting destroyed by tight ends. They gave up 3 touchdowns to the dude from the Rams. I can't remember his name.
And 1.1% ownership. Suck it, Dean.
Ertz also, in theory, can see like 15 targets against Pittsburgh, assuming that Wentz is not getting sacked every down, just because he's essentially the last man standing with this Philadelphia offense all beat up. No Goddard, and their receiving core is absolutely dreadful. Ertz, some people say he's kind of dusty and kind of toasty at this point, but he's kind of sort of somewhat interesting, I suppose. I don't.
Some people say Ertz when I pee.
Wait, you do? People are saying that about you specifically?
You better get to the doctor, brother.
I know a guy. Yeah. I'll give you. I got the ointment. All right. Is there anything else that's worth talking about from tight end, or shall we talk about our favorite defense? And we have like 5 minutes before we step aside and make way for we got Tambo and Beimfor warming up in the bullpen. They're going to show off a lot of the tools here at RG. Obviously, going to open up stuff as far as ownership and talk about the Slate, but in a different way. It's good. You don't want the same show over and over, obviously. And then, of course, after them, you got Tuttle, you got Christie, you got Roth. Roth will tell you what's going on weather-wise as well, too. So stay tuned. Taking you guys all at the lock, about 2 hours until lock going down. Defense. I like that Pittsburgh defense. I don't know if you heard me allude to the fact I think Pittsburgh is just going to swallow Carson Wentz today. They are a bit pricey. It's kind of hard to get there in some spots, but I do want to go out of my way to make sure that happens. Beer, defense, what are you doing?
A lot of Pittsburgh paired with Connor. Cleveland is the other team I'm pretty heavy on. You mentioned the offensive line. Rivers can turn the ball over. I'm not sold on this Colts offense. I know they want to run the ball a lot. That could take some of the air out of that play, but I think Myles Garrett can have a big day. Pair that defense up with Kareem Hunt. So Steelers and Browns, my two this week.
Yeah. Hey, load up some questions in chat. We'll do our best to knock those out. I'll try to scroll up. I know there's been questions throughout the show, but you guys aren't going to hear this until about a minute from now. I'm trying to buy some time, but yeah, get some questions in there. We got about 3, 4, 5 minutes or so before we step aside and make way for the next show. Jump in here, Grant. Do you have a favorite defense?
Cowboys going up against the top quarterback on the slate.
Well, wait a second. See, I'm playing some Cowboys. You
really are all in on that game.
Yeah, well, what I don't know if you noticed, Daniel Jones fumbles a lot. He takes a lot of sacks, and yes, Dallas has only gotten 8 sacks on the season so far, but Daniel Jones is probably going to get sacked multiple times. He's going to be throwing the ball a lot. It's just more plays. More plays equals more money and more points. It's just science. Even if they put up a decent amount of points, Jones is still going to end up with probably a fumble and probably an interception. Either one of them can go for a pick six or a fumble recovery for a touchdown. There's going to be a lot of passing in this game, and he's still going to get sacked 4 times in all likelihood. So with all that, 3.1K, play the Cowboys defense, play the Giants defense.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, it's not about, how many points you're giving up. That's not that important. It's about, pressure, sack fumbles, pick sixes, things like that. And hey, I want to play against a quarterback that's dropping back 50 times to pass, as opposed to a quarterback that's going to throw the ball 20 times to pass. You're much less likely to, get a pick six or something like that, obviously. Give me your favorite combination platter today, Grant, as far as I can't imagine. I'm assuming it's going to be the Giants and Dallas. Give me your favorite stack.
Ingram, Slayton, Daniel Jones, Cooper, and Gallup.
Is that all one lineup?
Yeah.
Okay. Grant, what's your favorite? Give me a favorite stack, maybe something off the board if you have a goofy stack.
Goofy stack. Gosh, that makes it real tough. I'm not going real goofy this week, so I'm looking for something. This is tough.
I can ask beer. That's the worst.
Yeah, ask beer. I don't know what to do with my hands.
Beer.
Just put them down to your side.
be a gentleman.
Well,
this is not just audio only.
Favorite stack is definitely Houston. I like going Watson, Fuller, and Cooks running it back with Robinson. I've made some running it back with Chark, so I like that game a lot. I like the Connor Pittsburgh stack, Kareem Hunt, Browns defense, and off the wall, Washington, Kyle Allen, Terry McLaurin, and Antonio Gibson running it back with one of Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods.
Beer, question in chat. Jalen Ramsey on Scary Terry. Do you care about that and LT 3-time if that's the case?
I don't know that he's going to shadow him, and he's done well against. I mean, you look at the gauntlet of corners that he's gone up against, and I know Ramsey's the best in the league. So there's slight concern there. I'm not going crazy on this. I'm going to make a few stacks. I'm not going to use McLaurin outside of a stack. So, yes, some concern, but still feel good enough about the stack to roll it out there.
Can you pair Kelsey and Waller? That seems suboptimal to me. They both can go off in theory, but I just don't. The math says, and like history says, especially from a Millie Maker perspective, I know Britt's done work on this, that tight end in the flex generally doesn't work. When do you guys do that?
I don't do it a lot. I mean, if there was a scenario, that's the one. I mean, Waller's basically a wide receiver. So I just, there's too many good running back plays for me to try to play both of those guys. I love them both, but I don't have any of them in either of them in the same lineup.
Grant, Lamb or Fuller?
Lamb.
Beer, Moore or Robbie Anderson? Pick your Carolina Panther.
I'm going Moore. It's going to be lower owned this week. It's finally time we get lower owned DJ Moore.
Does anybody care about Njoku being back?
No.
Nope.
Yeah. I mean, you're supposed to like end strong, George Costanza was on a high note, but that's the last thing I got. Grant, end strong. Give us something good.
Slayton, Jones, Cooper, Lamb combined for 100 points.
Chalky McChalkerson. Good Grant. I want you to.
Sorry, I'm better at DFS than you dummy.
Hey, my head-to-heads are in the lobby. Come at me.
There you go.
Yeah. What's happened? If you 100% game stack Dallas all season, how would you be doing right now?
Well, you can't retroactively. Yeah, when you know the results, it's a little bit easier in DFS, obviously.
Yeah, and the biggest predictor of future results are past results.
Oh, but then there's goofy outliers.
There's goofy outliers, 4 in a row, goofy outliers, fastest pace in the league by a wide margin, 2 lowest running teams.
You're the same guy that screams at the roulette wheel that red is due. Beer, we got to go. There's a show coming up after us. Like and subscribe. Check out those links in chat if you guys want a month free of RG Premium. You get yourself you don't get a month free. You get $5 off. You do get yourself a month free if you finish the top 10 of certain contests. If you sign up for the RG Badge contest, check out that link as well. Like, subscribe, stay tuned. Shows coming up after us. All the way up the lock. That's Beer. That's Chalky McChalkerson. I was Dean. Go Heat! We're recording a show later on today for premium members. Check that out. It's going to be good times. It'll be up around 3:30, give or take. Go Miami. We're out of here. Holler.
James Conner, 3 touchdowns. Back into Fantasy Bar, 6 of my favorite plays for Week 5 on FanDuel and DraftKings, including my favorite game I'm going to be attacking. What low-price tight end I think has huge upside here. A wide receiver that's been burning people that we're going to go back to. And a couple running backs I think are in tremendous spots. Ownership shouldn't be too bad. Who are we talking about? Belly up to the Fantasy Bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 5 edition, Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack. Good to be back here once again in the friendly confines of the Fantasy Bar, talking DraftKings and FanDuel. Thank you, as always, for stopping by here, guys. Now, before we get into the plays, we're going to take a quick look back at Week 4. We're going to continue to add these recaps in on every video to see how we did the previous week. And last week, it was all right. Not our best week, not our worst week. Had a couple hits. The Miami connection was good to us. Obviously, Dalvin Cook in that B spot as a pivot off of some of the chalkier running backs, but big disappointments with Darrell Henderson and Brandon Cooks giving us the bagel last week in a good matchup. Hawkinson found the end zone. He was all right. All in all, an okay week, but we aim to do better here. So let's do that. Before we get into this week, guys, do me a favor. Click that thumbs up button on YouTube. Really helps us out. Means a lot to me. I greatly appreciate it. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Get notified when these videos are coming out right to your inbox. All right, let's talk some Week 5. Let's talk FanDuel and DraftKings. Let's start at the wide receiver position this week with DJ Moore of the Panthers. So DJ Moore, a guy that's burned a lot of you out there. I realize that. A guy that's been heavily owned each and every week while Robbie Anderson continues to put up stats. But I think there's room for both of these guys to do some damage here this week against Atlanta. The thing is with DJ Moore this week, the ownership doesn't look like it's going to be from previous weeks. And we've seen him get 25% ownership in a lot of these big tournaments, upwards of 30%. I think people are finally frustrated with DJ Moore. Now's the time I want to jump on board here when he's going to be around 10% owned in this matchup. We talked about Atlanta, bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed, 2 wide receivers, massive total in this game. It's going to be a game a lot of people attack, no doubt. But when people bailing on DJ Moore, now's the time you're going to get heavier ownership on Robbie Anderson. You're going to see a very highly owned Mike Davis. This gives us a pivot off of some of that ownership, leverage off of some of that ownership, and still give us access to one of the higher total games on the slate. DJ Moore, the yards have been there. The touchdowns are coming. Let's get him in those lineups here in Week 5. All right, moving on. Next pick for us. Let's go to running back. We're going to go with the stud, high-range guys. We're going to go with James Conner of the Steelers. So a lot of chalk developing at this position. As of this recording, looks like guys like Zeke, Mike Davis, like we mentioned, going to be very, very highly owning, and they're in great spots, no doubt. Not all chalk is bad, but we can pivot off of some of that, find that leverage. I think James Conner, one of those guys. So let's check the boxes here. Let's take a look at James Conner. First of all, home favorites, which is where we like our running backs. About a 7-point home favorite here against Philadelphia. very advantageous. Think about it. Teams playing with the lead, running back's going to get more work, and we know the Steelers love to use a workhorse running back, and they have done that with James Conner. Been productive here over the last couple games. We had that hiccup in week 1, the injury, but since then, the last 2 games, this guy's averaging over 25 DraftKings points a game. So we're talking about an easy 3 to 4x return on this salary. That's tournament winning stuff right there. That's a cash game lock right there at these price points. And the Philadelphia defense, not been great. Middle of the road against running backs. Those numbers look all right, but they're giving up a lot of points, 20 or more points scored in every single game against this defense. So add it all up, I think the receiver is going to be popular here in this game. I want to go with the running attack here and roll with James Conner this week under 7K on DraftKings against the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, let's go to the tight end position, another spot. I think you're going to see a lot of popular plays like Evan Ingram. Let's go to the other side of that game and roll with Cowboys tight end Dalton Schultz. So Schultz kind of the forgotten man here. We got Amari Cooper, we got CeeDee Lamb, you have Zeke catching balls, we have Michael Gallup appearing here and there. And we all thought it was going to be Blake Jarwin putting big numbers up for this offense, but Dalton Schultz has stepped in and really hasn't skipped a beat here. Let's take a look at some of his numbers. Averaging 8 targets per game. And we're talking about 8 targets from a tight end at these prices, 4,800 on DraftKings, just 5,300 on FanDuel. Ownership looks like it's going to be very minimal. We know this is a game people are going to stack every which way with Dak, the receivers, Zeke, Daniel Jones, all these guys on the other side. Well, Dalton Schultz, kind of similar to DJ Moore, going to be the guy that really nobody uses. I mean, he's going to have some ownership for sure, but I think he'll be under 10% ownership, and it gives you access not only to this game, but to this Dallas Cowboys offense that continues to put up a ton of points. And they've always heavily utilized a tight end, and we've seen that. Schultz been getting a ton of use in this offense. Not only that, but the Giants. We know the defense not very good, especially against the pass. 24th in DVOA this season are the Giants against the pass. So we know this game will be a shootout. We know it'll be heavily owned, but I think Dalton Schultz will fall through the cracks here. I think he's cash game playable, but love the upside here in tournaments against the New York Giants. All right, back to the running back position. Our next play for us, James Robinson of the Jaguars. Now, kind of counterintuitive here. We talked about being a home favorite, a good spot for a running back, but we also want volume with our running back, and that's certainly what we've gotten out of James Robinson. We're talking about a guy averaging almost 20 touches per game and over 23 DraftKings points a game over the last 3. The matchup couldn't be any better here. Week in, week out, we've seen running backs trample this Houston Texans team. Last week, Dalvin Cook did it for us in that Beast of the Week spot, but we've had guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire go nuts against this team. And I think James Robinson going to be the next guy to tear this defense up. As you would guess, you're bad in DVOA. That means you're bad in giving up fantasy points, 3rd most fantasy points allowed to the running back position. So Robinson getting a ton of work here. Price is still fair, under 7K. Touches the ball on the ground, through the air. This game could shoot out. I love this game. But the main guy I like here from the Jacksonville side, definitely James Robinson here in a great matchup with the Houston Texans. All right, let's go to the other side of that game. You guys are not going to like this, but we are going to try it again. We're going to go back to the well here on wide receiver, Brandon Cooks. Now, I know you're turning off the video right now. You're saying, what in the hell are we doing here? Just hear me out here. And you don't have to play Brandon Cooks, guys. And that's the beauty of this video. These are guys that I'm going to play. These are guys going to be in my lineup, guys that I'm suggesting. You don't have to go there, but definitely disappointed us last week. Was in a great spot against Minnesota. Kind of like when you go grab that beer and it's skunked, you pour it down the drain, you move on. What do? You grab the next beer, and it may be the same one that you tried before, and it may be even better, maybe a little bit fresher. And I think that's what we get here out of Brandon Cooks. Plus, we're getting that beer, aka Brandon Cooks, at an even cheaper price tag this week at just $4,100. So let's take a look at some of the numbers and why I'm going back to Brandon Cooks. Led all Houston receivers, and we saw Kenny Stills have a decent game. Will Fuller have a big game. Randall Cobb's there. I know it's a wide receiver room filled with a lot of guys here, but this guy led them in both snaps and routes run in week 3. The Vikings seem to go out of their way to take him out of the game and succeeded. We've seen some games out of this guy where he's had some big games, and the main thing here is ownership. You know, at 4,500 last week, he stuck out to a lot of people, including myself. We talked about him in the video, but you're going to go from that 25, 30% ownership to under 10%, maybe even 5% here. This is one of those plays in tournaments. You don't have to go there in cash games, although he is cheap enough on DraftKings to take a shot here against this terrible Jags defense. But these are the kind of plays. Don't hold it against them. Don't hold it against me. I feel bad you got a 0. I got a ton of zeros across my lineup. The point is, I'm going right back to this play here. Better setup here than last week against Minnesota. Way less ownership, a cheaper price. Enough said. We're going back to the well here on Brandon Cooks. All right, it's time to take a look at my favorite play here for week 5. But before we do that, guys, we're going to run it back. We're going to continue to say thank you to all the loyal bar patrons with our Beast of the Week contest. Absolutely free to play. All you got to do, get in the comment section below the video and let me know fantasy points on FanDuel this week for my favorite.
What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, a.k.a. Toe Tag and Tambo, back for another edition of the Sunday Lineup HQ show for NFL. We're going to get into it here. I've been blessed, man. I'm lucky. I'm getting these great guests. This week, I got my first show with my guy, Eric Beimfor. You guys know him better as E. Beimfor on the sites. What's happening, Eric?
Not too much, man. I'm excited to be doing, I haven't been doing Sunday shows so far, and DB asked me to join you, and I can't turn that down. I can't turn down a show with you. So it's a super fun slate. So I'm even more excited to talk about it. It's kind of a weird slate with the postponements and all that kind of stuff, but that makes it fun for this kind of discussion.
Yeah, some more news out today around that stuff. Surely we don't have to worry about that with what we've got here, but I kind of like a slate like this. 13's kind of a little bit too big, sometimes 2 or less in these showdowns. I know you do a lot of good work on that with, Slate IQ factors and your articles and stuff that you go into on the site. I had one that I thought of this morning, but if this is sort of like the cherry on top that you save for the end, this show. But if you don't consume the cake, what good is the cherry? So you guys got to get over to Rotogrinders. You got to check it out. Producer Devin's going to drop the link in, get $5 off. You'll be able to check everything out that we do. I just mentioned with Eric, he's got some great showdown articles. He does some game theory stuff for the main slate. And then, of course, the Q Hunting show. If you guys aren't checking that out, these are guys that are going to these live finals all the time, himself and Squirrel Patrol, who I've had on the show in the past. So we're going to get into it here. A lot to talk about, but it is definitely a little bit shorter slate, as you mentioned, as far as games go. But I like it, man. There's a lot we can talk about. There's some huge totals out there, and it looks like some really good leverage spots. We're, of course, going to let you guys put your questions in the chat. We'll get to those as we go throughout the show. Going to show you some groups, going to show you some settings, going to pick Eric's brain. The good news is Eric likes to play, 3 to 7 lineups, right? And he still has to know how to leverage the field within that setup. I've shown you guys before on Lineup HQ. And Eric, I'm not sure if you use this, but a lot of people simply think that Lineup HQ, I'm not putting 150 and I don't need that. But do you use this? I like having that little slide off on the side for when I'm building my 1 to 3 max. What about you?
So I use it mostly for looking at kind of just getting an overall feel for not necessarily like me building my team and putting them into like this little slide out or whatever, but I like to have it. I like to there's so much information here. I like to have it in front of me mostly to kind of get a general feel for the slate overall. Like what I'm doing, I kind of develop my own thoughts, right? Like everybody has their own weird process for how they figure out who they want to play, but having all this information, projections and ownership and ceilings and all that kind of stuff, and who other people are on, right? Who Squirrel is on, who's Noto's core plays, who's your conviction plays, like getting all that in one screen to be able to kind of see what my opponents are doing, or maybe is there something I missed, or, just having all that information in front of me, I think is huge.
Yeah, and I talk about that all the time. Lineup HQ, to me, best optimizer out there. I'm biased, but it's true. It's the facts, right? If you look at it, and I always call it, a little bit of virtual hand building, because like you just said, you can get that oversight where you can actually see everything. All the information you need is right in front of you. And even when I'm selecting, like if I'm doing, Lamar Jackson lineups and I want around 20 of them this week, let's say, or Mahomes, maybe I want 30 of those. We'll talk in a second. I see the red dot there. For those of you that don't know, that's one of Eric's conviction plays. We're going to get to that. But for me, it's like I like seeing how those all shake out once I put some rules and groups in, and then I'll start saving them. I'll make 30 or 40, and then I'll just start going through I hate that one, or I'll do a single swap because I see a correlation that I think would be a good secondary stack or something like that. So definitely love having the tool for access to that. We'll show some of that after, but yeah, you've got your conviction plays on here. Maybe just talk a little bit about how you see this slate overall, your overview, and then we'll get into sort of some leverage spots and things we can do at each position.
I think it's a kind of unique slate, actually. So the first I would say the first 4 weeks were in general relatively similar, especially once we lost like CMC and Saquon. Once we started losing those, stud workhorse running backs, the slate started to get really, really similar. There really wasn't anywhere to spend. Everybody was packed between the 5K and 7K range at like basically every position. So, and then we had a ton of games and we had these epic shootouts, the Cowboys, Seahawks, whatever. And I know we have the Cowboys on the slate today, but it's not quite, facing Daniel Jones and the Giants is not quite the same thing as facing Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. So I think it's a lot more of a unique slate with less games, super condensed ownership on the couple of games that, appear to be the most interesting, which, to some may feel like, oh God, how the hell do I fade, this clear and obvious play? But to me, it makes it so much better for tournaments because if you can just think just a little bit differently, you don't have to go stacking you don't have to go stack the Jets in tournaments to be, contrarian. You can, we'll get to it in a second, you can stack the best offense in the NFL and be different on this slate, just because of how it works out. I'm not saying the Panthers are bad plays or the Giants are bad plays or whatever, but just how the slate kind of breaks down, it makes it really, really interesting for tournaments where you can just pivot slightly to a different stack or build a little bit differently, which is what I talked about in my article this week. There's 4 very, very clear running back plays that people are going to use, in their 2 running back spots and flex around, say, the most popular game stack. You just start to see how everyone is building, which allows you to kind of just deviate slightly and you get super unique with just as much upside as anybody else.
I agree. And it's like you said, one of those things where it's almost like when the slate shrinks slightly, people assume, or automatically scramble to, okay, I got to go to some of this chalk, then I need to have that. But what happens because of that, like you said, is more congested ownership overall. And I'll show some stuff going through just my thoughts, with building 150. I want to see sort of what that looks like and go around it. But it's little things. I do it at places like running back where, like you said, extremely congested, right? Yeah. I'll get overweight on the ones I just am good with. And then there's a way that I might set it up and move it around. So let's move into it. Let's talk about some of these quarterbacks. You just hinted at it. I think, by far we've seen it. They had the battle, the island game there. I'm a big Ravens fan, but the Chiefs did work against them. They are, in my opinion, as well, the best offense in football. But I don't think the Ravens are that far behind when they put it all together. And you got those two guys, Lamar and Mahomes, at the top. Neither cross 8K, and both are coming in under 10% ownership. Clearly, you're on Mahomes. Maybe talk to me a little bit about what you're doing with him. Lamar, you can stack with one guy. I think that's a rule you can set up when you go into your player groups and set that up, or you can do more. But, for me, it's normally one guy with Lamar since he has that rushing upside. And then Mahomes, you could stack him with 3 guys if you wanted, the way he chucks that thing and slings it around. So give me your thoughts on the Mahomes play. Obviously, you've tagged him up, and then we'll go through some of the others here at this position.
Yeah, so I think they're both pretty similar, just in terms of the theory behind them. I actually did talk a little bit in my article this week about the Ravens, a Lamar stacking that game as a way to deviate from the popular build. And I think that's really viable too. Just like we talked about, I play a lot more minimal teams, so I really have to start to condense down. If I was playing 150, I'd probably be getting some of both of these guys in both of these games. But I kind of side with Mahomes this week. Just like if you take a step back on a slate like this, the Panthers game is going to be extremely popular for good reason. The 2 bad defenses, especially the Falcons secondary, the prices are great, but you get a game with the best offense in the NFL it's just because of how kind of the schedule has broke and just maybe a little bit of weird game flow that they just haven't really exploded. And it hasn't been on one of these main slates. And everybody is all in buying CEH, right? And again, same thing, good play. But everybody is just like, okay, we know they're gonna roll the Raiders, so I'm just gonna play CEH, and that's how I'm gonna get my Chiefs exposure. But there's nothing to say that Patrick Mahomes can't score all the touchdowns. Like we have the best offense in the NFL, and everyone is conceding that they're going to just score a ton of points, but they're not interested in the best quarterback, almost of all time, and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. And I think Watkins has picked up a little bit of steam because people are realizing how cheap he is. But, even Hardman, if you really want to play him with CEH, you can play him with CEH. I just think that it's a spot on a slate where the cap isn't that tight and the opportunity cost is not that great at really any position that I just want to bet on the Chiefs at this ownership.
Yeah, and I'm with you there on that. Like you said, that you look at one thing, I always try and do this. Obviously, there's position scarcity and you're looking at what's available at each position. But, 30% on CEH, I like them. I'm using plenty of them. But at the same time, when it's hard to get overweight, I talked about this last week on these guys. He's a conviction play. I think he's going to have a great game. There's a lot of opportunity for him to get there. But when you get these guys running up around 30, 40, like I don't even normally play my running backs that high unless it's like a pure value spot when we used to have like a 3K running back that just gets subbed in at the last minute due to an injury. And then, okay, maybe I'll go 65% on him because I don't want to break my whole slate up. And I know some guys will go all in. But now you flip over here, Tyreek Hill for $100 more is 1/3 of the ownership. And like you said, it's a passing league. Dean just updated in the chat. This is one thing the elephant in the room, we didn't get to it. He says Julio is out. So I guess the announcement must just came out. Yes, Adam Schefter is inactive for today. So that's going to be big when we get to wide receiver. Talk about the Wizard of Oz in there at 3K straight. So we'll get to that. That's big news. Thank you, Dean. Bobby Fye wants to talk about the Jets. We'll go to that after here, Bobby. I got some takes there as well. Just my old guy Flacco, right? He's down there pretty cheap, but hey, you got to see. I got some takes on that game. But back to the Chiefs, like you said, very stackable, right? There's Watkins at 4,500. There's Mecole Hardman, 4,400. I think Kelce is fine as a pay-up option. Again, nobody's expensive on this slate, right? 7.9K is as high as it gets with Hopkins and Lamar. Zeke will be the most popular at the higher price values at 7.8, which probably rightfully so. I think it's a good way to leverage off of that passing attack in that game. I want to ask you this about Dak, though. Do you have any thoughts late in the week? Because this is sort of where my mind's going, that it's going to be like almost the reverse thing, right? Where everyone thinks that, you got to leverage off this passing game with Dallas. You got to play Zeke instead. That's how you do it. That's the way. Leverage, man. Yep. Game theory. And now it's not really true. If you go look at it, Zeke's like 35% owned. Not as many people maybe want to play him with Dak. So that might be a way to get a little bit different and pick up sort of that entire end zone, red zone type touches. But don't you think you can, get away with some stuff with Dak and Lamb and Gallup and some of these Schultz and guys that no one's touching in that game, or, so to speak, when you look at total ownership versus the others? What's your thoughts on that?
So that's been like kind of my thing this week. I talked about it. Like I talked about it with Overzet. I talked about it with Squirrel, and I wrote about it. And it's like coming kind of this week is just the perfect example. It's probably been more of a thing than even we realized or wanted to admit, but the field is getting, quote unquote sharper, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody came in, to the week. Oh my God, Dallas is just scoring 1 million points. They're playing the Giants. It's another, that's the Coors Field of NFL, right? Cowboys games. And then, so everybody thinks that when they first open the slate, and then all week, everybody says the same thing. Oh, this is the spot that the Dallas passing game isn't going to blow up, right? It's been fluky. I have not heard one single person that's like, oh yeah, the Cowboys passing game is just going to keep doing this. Literally every single person is like, okay, this is like where the buck stops, and this is where you play Zeke. It's literally what everyone said. So, 3 years ago, people would have been like, you had not everybody was as smart. Not everybody had access to the same information. So you would get, people just keep playing Dak and Amari, keep playing the pass game. Now it's the opposite. People are seeing the same sell high, buy low spots, and the ownership is showing that. So we're getting Zeke chalk off of a bunch of totally meh games, and the ownership, in my opinion, even the projections anywhere I've seen are probably too high on the Dallas passing game. So I don't know if I'm attacking it necessarily in any of my teams, but I think I really do believe that like Dak, especially to like Gallup and CD or something, because I think like you talked about the cap. Amari might still get a little bit just because everybody kind of has money to spend, especially with Julio out. So I really do think something like that, using these unowned pieces of Dallas and stacking that game up when everybody thinks it's going to be, you know, the time that it doesn't shoot out. I actually think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I think you called it at the start of the week. You know, Amari was showing something around 24%, which is where we got to go with it out of the gates. You know, just had a huge game. The opportunity all season has been there for him, and he's been making do with it. So that shows. I mean, he's already down to 19.8. That's still 20% though. So is what it is. But here's why I was bringing it up is because if you go down, Lamb, one of the better matchups of the week in the slot, 6.7%. Gallup, I think, was 7%. Yeah. So I'm going to talk on that just real quick here, but the thought process is this. You know, the reason those guys are so low is because there's so many people out there that have plenty of lineups that have 0 of them, which obviously brings the total ownership down. So there's a lot of people when Lamb scores a touchdown going to be like, oh, that's stupid. I didn't have any of him. I thought that was going to be Zeke. Or you'll see something stupid like a end zone fade to Gallup when, you know, they thought, oh, here comes my Zeke touchdown. And that's what ends up happening. So I don't think you have to get crazy with it. But I do, like, for me, I just looked at my ownerships, and I do talk about this on the show on Sundays. That's why it's the best show to be a part of, at least for my content, where you can find what I'm at. But Gallup, you know, I've got 8%. It's not crazy, but I at least have enough that I'm not going to be one of those people with 0 that brought it down to that 12% CeeDee Lamb. I do like him. And I think another interesting angle, and it goes back to quarterback here, because we'll talk about Jones real quick. I like Jones quite a bit. What's the natural stack when you've got Daniel Jones? Again, we're here to talk about leverage and game theory and that sort of stuff. So, you know, everyone's going to go Jones with Slayton or Tate and Ingram. Some of that combination. And who's going to be the guy on the other side? Part of that ownership play, Zeke or maybe Cooper. But why not Gallup, right? Why not, you know, use the 2 wide receivers and Schultz? Why not go some of these other routes? So any thoughts on that? And then we'll move into sort of some of the offsetting plays that maybe some, you know, can't stomach as well. And then we'll move on to running back.
I think that's how I would attack it if I really, you know, if I wanted to attack that game. That's actually probably the reason why I'm struggling with it the most, is because the Giants side is the most popular side. Like, I know I can get leverage with the Cowboys. Like, I really like the Gallup play, kind of like you summarized. I mean, he's their big play guy. I understand the game logs don't look good, and, you know, I understand all of that. But we just saw it, 2 weeks ago, he was the one who broke the slate for the Cowboys. And so we know that he can do it. I really like him. CD has the best matchup, and now he's 6K. So people are not interested in that. So I know the Dallas side, there's great with Schultz, like you said, at tight end, using an unknown tight end in your game stack. If Schultz catches the 2 touchdowns, you know, you're just smashing the field. So anyway, I like the Cowboys side. I feel comfortable leveraging that in tournaments, but it's really hard. Like, Slayton and Ingram are going to be very popular, and it's really hard to get away from them on the Giants side. So I think that's the difficult part. So if I were doing it, you know, if I were playing Jones, Slayton, and Ingram, I would absolutely be using Gallup, CD, you know, or putting Schultz in over Ingram and playing Golden Tate. I would definitely be focusing on how to get different within that stack. Yeah,
and speaking of tight end, you mentioned Schultz. Akins is now out, so Fells is in play when we get there with Houston. That's definitely interesting news. They were both, I think, 34 and 3,300, so I had it set up for the 3,400 to be in there, so I could just pivot off after the show. But, you know, that's good to know. Thanks again to Dean. Shout out in the chat. We got some more questions coming in. We'll go through it. But who are some of these guys down low you like? I guess we'll get to the Jets real quick. I'm not high on this, but, you know, a lot of people would want to still play Kyler, so you can run Kyler with Hopkins and run it back with Jets. I just think because Flacco's so cheap, there's him and then there's Kyle Allen. These are, you know, milli maker bullet shots. You want to go after it. I'm not advocating to go too crazy here, but definitely have some of them being so cheap, and what their stack options are also extremely cheap, right? You got Flacco, Crowder, Herndon, Jeff Smith. I mean, these are all cheap guys, and then you can fit whoever you want around it and not really worry about too much. As far as the Arizona side goes in that game, I think you could see, I talked about this on the Tourney Takes pod with the boys, is this could be like the tilt fest of all time on a slate like this, where you've got Drake finally shows up and does his thing, and Herndon finally shows up. It used to be the best matchup in football for tight ends against Arizona. So you could definitely have a secondary stack there if you don't want to play a guy like Flacco, or if you don't want to pay up for Kyler. But is there anybody else down here that you like before we move to running back? And then if other stuff pops up throughout, we'll bring it up.
I think just the thesis of those punt guys is fine. You know, I can't personally stomach dusty ass Joe Flacco. Putting you know, I'm not putting a Kia on Joe Flacco personally, but, you know, props to anybody who does. I don't really want to do it for Kyle Allen either, but I will say Either way, no one, it's the same thing. 2 years ago, if we got these punt quarterbacks, like they'd be the stone chalk. Everybody'd have them in cash, all that. But it's a little different now that I think you can do some interesting things in some tournament builds if you really want to go that route. A guy that also makes me sick to my stomach, even bringing up, but I'm so into the Chiefs, just scoring a ton of points today, that I don't think Derek Carr is the worst tournament play ever. Everybody is really kind of hyping up, this quarterback thing that, you got to spend up because these studs have such high ceilings. And I agree for the most part, but I think we're working off a 4-week sample where we've had just really, truly absurd shootout games. And Dak running for 3 touchdowns, Russ throwing 3 touchdowns at the 1-yard line in the same game, like just kind of some crazy stuff that has happened to where I don't think you have to force yourself into only those quarterbacks. And so, if the Chiefs really hang 40 or 50 here and Derek Carr is not good, but if he has to throw 45, 50 times, he can throw for 303 and score you 30 plus DraftKings points. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I think all those guys are in play down there, more so than a normal week.
Yeah, I only like the cheap guys because if you don't really have to put a Kia, I can put a tank of gas from a Kia and flip it to a Bentley or something, right? So that's kind of what you're looking to do down below. But I guess, a couple more people brought up in the chat was obviously the Deshaun Watson, situation that's looking like a great spot that, it's 11%. It's not out of this world. It's, only one every 10 lineups really, give or take, that has them. And then of course, I love Teddy B. I like Matt Ryan on the other side. Yeah. I've come around more on Teddy B than Matt Ryan. I just think it's because he has so many options, so stackable. And again, ways that you can get unique with it, where we're going to go and segue into Mike Davis in a second. You can go with just the pass attack. You can use him with Mike Davis. There's too many ways to use that stack. And again, Atlanta is just bad, as is Carolina. So it's going to be like when we talk about Dallas when we get to that. But any thoughts on Watson, Bridgewater, those guys before we move it along?
Yeah, so I was just looking up, we were talking before the show, just how impactful some of these injuries are. And the Jaguars situation, Julio, everybody understands the impacts of Julio being in or out, right, for DFS purposes. But I don't think people put enough emphasis on like defensive linemen, DBs, offensive linemen, these non-skilled players. And the Jaguars were a big one to monitor today that I don't think people were thinking about enough. So and Akins. So just on this, live on this show, I was into that game already, and that's really grown on me because for the Jaguars, Josh Allen, Miles Jack, and CJ Henderson are all out. So that's Miles Jack is the number 1 rated linebacker for PFF this year. Josh Allen is far and away their best defensive player, and CJ Henderson is, their stud rookie corner who's been really good. Yep. Last week, after those guys got hurt in the game against the Bengals last week, the Bengals were doing fine. Like the Jaguars defense isn't stout or anything, but the Bengals were meh and Mixon was okay. Those guys got hurt and the Bengals never punted again. They scored 5 straight possessions. So this defense is putrid. So it's the perfect spot for basically all these Texans. I think I really like Watson, Fuller, now Fells, and even David Johnson.
Let's segue with that. I mean, we're going to talk about the chalk, but are you in on David Johnson? Because here's one of the things too, just talking from a large field game theory perspective. I know that Houston defense is extremely popular, right? It's for a defense, I should say. It was pushing 15% last time I looked. That would correlate some with a David Johnson play, but David Johnson's only coming in at around 13%. And most people want that passing game attack there, almost like the reverse situation. But one, it's a game that's a little more off the radar, not quite, completely gone. It's a small slate and it's a great total and everything that goes with it. But I think you could easily pair together David Johnson and the Texans and just hope that with those 3 guys missing and then some, you can do some work that way. What's your thoughts on that before we get into the chalk?
Yep, I was on David Johnson before, but I really wanted to see those injuries for him. I think the passing game is probably fine anyway. Watson is so good, Fuller is so good that I wasn't too worried about them. But I do think David Johnson is not Zeke or not CMC, where I do think there's a little bit of the matchup mattering for him, and the ownership is just so freaking condensed on those 4 running backs that
Yeah.
I really am interested in going kind of a little bit different at running back. Like it turns you into like this maybe almost too contrarian of a lineup build, but I think it's really interesting when everybody is spending down at wide receiver, or maybe a little bit of mid tier, and everybody is spending up for Zeke and CEH and Mike Davis at running back. Just you can play David Johnson. We'll get to him. I like Antonio Gibson. There's other guys that you can play for a little bit cheaper with not that different of volume or matchup. And now it just creates this super unique build that's different. So David Johnson is definitely high on my board.
Yeah, and I like that. Talk to me a little about the chalk, because I've got some thoughts here for large field, but just, especially for you, high dollar, smaller fields, anything really in that aspect, pretty obvious. And I think you can definitely lump Hunt in there, and you should at 20%. But I've seen pretty much you can go back after this and build the magic cash build that everybody has right now, especially with the Julio news. And it definitely has Mike Davis, Zeke, and CEH in that build. So what's your thoughts around those three, like where you're at on each one, and how would you go about building your lineups with those three and mixing around them? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's like the toughest thing so far this year. It's like it's probably the biggest trend, even more so than like the buy low, sell high thing we were talking about with the Cowboys passing game, where the chalk running backs have always been like you fade chalk wide receivers, you deviate with your game stack or whatever. And the chalk running backs are just like almost unfadable. That's just been like NFL DFS 101, right? You jam in these good stud running backs and you play some unique wide receivers. This year, that has not been the case at all. And I don't think it's that fluky. I think we don't have that trend came from the times when we had, to quote Smith, the team jam 'em in days, right? We had David Johnson for the Cardinals. We had Le'Veon Bell. We had CMC. We had these guys, and then like you brought up, we would have the random 3K, the random super cheap guy that pops in because of an injury and is just unfadable. None of that exists anymore. So the guys that are the most popular, they're the best plays, and no one is arguing that. But the difference between them and the field is nowhere near what it used to be in terms of whether it be point per dollar or raw projection or whatever. Mike Davis is awesome. He 99% CMC, whatever people, Levitan's calling him, like he's great. Zeke is great, but they're not. This isn't a Le'Veon Bell versus I don't know,
right?
Whoever. It's not that situation anymore. So I think deviating at running back has become a lot more viable, and it's something I'm actively really actually trying to do now. So I love those guys and I'm not avoiding them, but I actually think I don't really want to play like two of them in the same team, even if I'm getting a little bit unique at the other spots.
Yeah. And you talked about it here. That's a group, I'm big on groups, and that's one of the ones right out of the gate. So if you guys haven't used this tool before, this is one how you would set it up. You head on over to groups. You're in a player group. You put Ezekiel Elliott, you put Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and you put Mike Davis, and it's your call. I like to go a little bit different in the flex. I got no problem using wide receiver. I don't use a lot of tight end. Obviously, Britt Devine, yourself, you guys have looked at articles and looked at things in the past and done some articles based on results DB and Gridiron IQ and all that stuff to check it out and see that obviously two tight ends doesn't normally work. I think there's one situation this week where it could actually work. We talked about the game with Mahomes. I think you could definitely see Kelsey, and I know Ruggs is in. The news also just came out, but I was expecting that anyway. But Darren Waller is almost like a wide receiver one. So there's a spot there that you could easily see those two both go off, and they have the ceiling in them to be that spot and be able to do it. So I didn't mind a little bit of that this week. When we get the settings, I'll show that. But very simply here, you just put who you want in the group. You could say at most two. I definitely would have at least this setting on. Eric mentioned just now saying at most one. I got no problem with that either. So it's really up to you what your risk tolerance is. But for me, even in large field, at most two, I like these guys. But going back, just looking at ownership percentage, it's, again, very hard for me to get overweight on Mike Davis because there's so many ways I'm going to that game, and I'm leveraging with Teddy B and the passing game. And it's not super leverage or anything. He's going to be owned, but guys you're mixing in that others aren't. Let's talk about it. Curtis Samuel is one that you can use. Ian Thomas. Robert Bob Tonyan just got 3 touchdowns against his team. They're the absolute worst team in football against the tight end. I wrote him up in the expert survey. I know he's not a high volume guy, but it's almost like you could fall into it here, and everyone's paying up at tight end. So that's just a way of where I might not get to 36%. I think I've got 30% Davis. I'm over on Zeke. I just think the spot as one of the better plays in the entire slate. And how often is Zeke 7.8K? He's been getting vultured at the goal line plenty. There's just so many opportunities. But like I said, in my other lineups, I'm leveraging those wide receiver plays. And then CEH, I'm just, I'm on, but I'm naturally under because of that passing game and being so heavy on the Mahomes. Talk to me about Hunt, and then maybe give me 2 or 3 what you would call your tournament winners or guys with massive upside that nobody's talking about.
Yeah, Hunt is really interesting because I see a little bit of conflicting reports on just exactly how owned he'll be. He'll definitely be the 4th out of those big 4. Some people kind of have some of the cheaper guys. We lost McKinnon with Mostert in, so that I think that boosts up Hunt a little bit and probably boosts up DJ too. But if we look just at the first 4 weeks, the Colts defense looks great, and it doesn't appear to be the world's best matchup for Hunt, even though Chubb is out. And maybe there are some concerns. Last week, Dearness Johnson and even Dontrell Hilliard got in there. Hunt wasn't just the workhorse when Chubb went down. I don't think that that's how they want to play. He's certainly not going to play. He's not going to play as many snaps as Mike Davis, but I think it's more like 70-30, 80-20 type thing for Hunt and those other guys. That be, combine that with the fact that the Colts lost Darius Leonard, probably the best linebacker in football, and they're a little banged up. And I'm not sure that the Colts offense is frankly good enough to be scoring a bunch of points. And the Browns can probably run on anyone. So Hunt has become probably my favorite guy out of those top 4 to use in tournaments because he has the upside of the workhorse. I don't expect it necessarily, but we know he can catch passes. He was catching passes when Chubb was in. He has the upside of the workhorse. They just ran for 1 million yards on the Cowboys, and the Cowboys defense sucks, but it wasn't really their run defense that was the issue. So I think the Browns might just be this, can run on anybody type of offense. And Hunt has been great. And if he's going to be lower than those other guys, I would like to buy on him. And so the other guy, just that I wanted to bring up, like you said, kind of a tournament winner type play is Antonio Gibson. I think we've seen his role grow in general. Since week 1, we were all excited about him in week 1, rightfully so. He's a really talented kid. I think last week he still only played 44% of the snaps. They were kind of chasing the whole time, but on 30 something snaps, he got the ball 17 times and had an extra target. So 18 times they tried to get him the football out of, more than half the time he's in the game, they're getting him the ball. So those are the kind of guys that I want to be early on. Maybe he does only play 45% of the snaps again this week, but he can still get there in that. But if we start to see him grow into this closer to the CMC role, it's the old Panthers coaching staff, and maybe that's what they want him to grow into. If we start to, what happens when he plays 75% of the snaps? He's a stone cold lock at 5K. We just haven't seen it yet, so the field isn't really getting there with him. Whereas we obviously have seen it with Mike Davis. We obviously have seen it with CEH. So the Rams' run defense is not anything that I fear, and Antonio Gibson is just a good player. So I just want to get out in front of that, and I'm comfortable being wrong if he still isn't playing a ton of snaps.
Yeah, I love the call, and you mentioned the Panthers coaching staff. What about the Kyle Allen in a quarterback?
God.
That's the CMC check down. You don't have to use him, but that's the play, right?
Yep.
That's where I think a lot of that comes from. I think, like you said, the price is right. The ability is there. We've saw it even against the Ravens. He had some great breaks that you just saw him take it off and go with it. So I think that's a good spot. I definitely like that. I've come around on Hunt. I'm just updating because obviously on the Tourney Takes pod, we talked a little about it. Digging back in, for me, it was the Friday practice, full practice, good to go. And then looking back at the last game, a lot of that stuff with Hilliard, who I was worried about a little bit, and who's the other guy? I just lost the name.
Yep, Dearness Johnson.
Yes, Dearness Johnson, yes. And I was thinking about them a little bit because all the touches, but really it looked like a lot to do with the blowout factor. And yes, he was coming back from a slight injury. So yes, they're going to lean him off. They don't want to have, Chubb already go down and then have Hunt at risk when they're already blowing them out. So made more sense. And I've come around and I'm kind of hoping he's sitting around 19%. A lot of hype around him, but not quite as much as some would think. So I do think that's a good spot. I love your Gibson call. Couple other guys. So 2 other guys I like here, and we'll move it along a little faster after this. But I like James Conner. Saw a stat. I think you see Mr. Helicopter plays himself right here. Ian Hartitz had posted something around the lines of when Connor's a home favorite of like 3 or more, and he's been this low owned or something. He's had like 23 DraftKings points per game in enough spots. So I kind of did like that. And we know, again, back to sort of what everybody's doing, the chalk defense is Pittsburgh. But how many people are doing that with James Conner? And I think that's the play. They do correlate quite well. If they're going to be up, they're going to be putting him in positions to score more. I think that's a great little secondary stack for your large field tournaments is James Conner with the Pittsburgh defense, when a lot of people have the Pittsburgh defense without him, and they go well together. It's not always the number one correlation anymore that you see. You don't always see it on Millie Maker winning lineups, but I definitely like that. Talked a little bit earlier about Drake. If ever there was a spot, we keep saying this, but this may actually be it, because I think even the Arizona D is in play against Joe Flacco, who we talked about earlier. So you can run that both ways. And then what about James Robinson? I kind of really like him, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you look at some of the stats and the numbers he's been putting up, I'm not quite sure where 7.9% ownership comes from. I mean, week 1, people were crowning CEH as rookie of the year, running all over them in that Thursday night football game to kick off the season. James Robinson's been on fire and getting all kinds of usage. So what's your thoughts on him?
I think him and Connor are really similar to me in that, no one is claiming that they're necessarily better plays or in a better matchup or whatever, or better football players than the guys that are the chalk. But I think we have guys that they are workhorses. Robinson is the man in that backfield. He consumes it's something like 95% of their running back touches. We know the Steelers run a workhorse. Connor is the workhorse. He plays passing downs. He gets the goal line. So you're getting guys that have probably higher projected volume even than some of the chalkier guys at lower ownership. And I just think those are kind of spots. I'm not saying I have crazy strong conviction on any of those guys, like jam in 100% James Conner. But I think those are the kind of guys that you should be getting. If you're building you're building 150, I would be overweight on those guys as opposed to I got to find a way to get over on Mike Davis. Like, there's not really an advantage to getting over on Mike Davis. But if James Robinson beats Mike Davis and you're over on James Robinson, there's a huge advantage to that.
Yeah, and I am. I've got 30%. I just looked up the number on James Robinson. So we're good there. I certainly love the spot. I think it works for both sides. You could, like I said, you could use them in a secondary stack with Fuller if you want to just be leave that game but just have pieces of it, or you can obviously go full out and have your Watson, Fuller. You want to go back to the well on Brandon Cooks. We are going to segue to wide receiver here in a second. You have the 0 from last week. We'll talk about that in a second. Some questions right quick. Can you stack 4 Giants in large field? Absolutely. I think if you think that game's going to shoot out, the previous show to us, Grant was talking about how get all the guys in that game. We got some Smiz references on here, but play all the dudes. You talked about earlier about Team Jam 'em in. That's another one. So I think if you're looking at that stuff, you can definitely play as many as you want. I think that's where you sort of step away from what the norm is in these large field tournaments where people are, I got to stack with at least one receiver. No, you got to stack with probably at least 2 these days, if not more. So I got no problem with that. Just quick note on running back, and then we'll move it along. But I got some Gurley for my Atlanta, Carolina, just small numbers, just so people know. I've got some Josh Jacobs. You talked about if the Raiders can keep that game a little bit closer. Again, the other thing that was denoted on week 1 was that David Johnson, comeback player of the year against that Kansas City run defense. I mean, it's one of those spots, but I think that it's a possibility. And because it's division game and all those factors, you just never know. I know they're a 13-point fave, but there's certainly an opportunity there for him to get some points. These aren't guys I'm super heavy on, but when you're running these game environments, and then the last guy, this one's gross, but Devontae Freeman, and we never have some defense takes on here, but there certainly is a spot to say this would be a good spot when a quarterback's almost 20% owned. If you're not playing him in the lineup and you're not playing Zeke in the lineup, and obviously likely not Cooper, that's all the chalk on the Dallas side, you could definitely have the Giants defense and or Giants defense with Devontae Freeman and really leverage yourself up against the field in a sense of you're not just saying, I don't like going that route, I'm going to go somewhere else. You're saying, I don't like going that route because I don't think it's going to work. And so I'm going to double down and hit it twice and run that stuff against it. So any thoughts on that before we move to wide receiver?
Yeah, it makes me sick. But the Giants defense is probably my favorite defensive play of the week on DraftKings. On FanDuel, it's a little bit, FanDuel is such the pricing is so weird nowadays that you don't have to get that crazy. But, on DraftKings, like you said, so if you want to fade, just blindly fade the Cowboys, that's totally fine. But where you start to give yourself an easier path, right? We're playing against other humans and we're trying to create a path to first place in tournaments. So just not playing the Cowboys when they're popular, it is fine. But you're already saying by not playing them, like, I don't think their offense is going to do well, right? So if their offense doesn't do well, what does that mean? How are they not doing well? Well, the Giants defense is probably playing pretty well. Okay, so if the Giants defense is playing pretty well, and which I don't think the Giants defense is as bad as everybody kind of perceives, and the Cowboys have one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. We don't really realize it because they're scoring points every week and they're still the Cowboys. But if any other team had these O-line injuries and there was a $2,200 defense against them, and the offense throws 50 times a game, they'd be 1,000,000% owned. But nobody's playing the Giants. So, you just start to kind of stack, like you said, stack these things together. Okay, now the Giants defense plays well. What does that mean? The Giants can run a little more, and they don't have to be airing it out all the time. So who does that benefit? Devonta Freeman. Again, feels gross, but those are the kind of just things you have to walk through as you start to build tournament teams.
Yeah, and someone say maybe it's too cute, but I just don't think so, because it's the game environment you're saying is going to go off, and you want all these pieces of it, but you don't want the game the way it could actually go. So if you think about it almost like a showdown slate, you're looking for what could the possibilities be. That is certainly in the realm of possibilities. So I like that. We've got still about 20 minutes to go here, so don't want to rush through anything, but just the idea of, talk about the wide receivers that you like and go through some of that. I'm a chalk donkey up here at the top, but I don't know. I think Slayton is really cheap. It's, again, hard to get overweight when he's 27%.
Yeah.
And the start of the week, it looks like 20 is a good number on him. It's right. As the week goes on, the more and more, he's definitely going to be around this number. So you've got that. Anderson, Cooper, Anderson Cooper. Ridley is there at, a spot. Another one that Ian Hardetsy brought it up this morning with Julio out now. I know that the Wizard of Oz here, I don't even want to try and butcher the name, but he's going to be talked about quite a bit after his island game numbers that we saw last week when Ridley put up a 0. But in games where Ridley gets 8 targets, besides, I don't even know if he got 8 the last game, but in games where he gets 8 targets, there's like a run of 10 games that he just absolutely goes off. So talk to me about some of these chalk guys, and then we'll get into some of our favorite plays and go to tight end after that.
With Slayton, I don't think it's bad necessarily. I think with it's just you have to be, I've done it a couple times this week, stealing, because I really like how he says it. Drew Dinkmeyer just basically calls it, you just have to be thoughtful. You don't have to completely fade, Darius Slayton. Oh my God, he's the chalk. I can't, just can't play him. You just have to make a team that makes sense from an ownership perspective, from a leverage perspective, whatever around him. Yes, if you're playing Daniel Jones and Slayton and Amari and Robbie Anderson and Zeke, whatever, that's probably pretty bad in tournaments. But if you're playing, if you do like what we talked about earlier and you play Gallup and, you bring it back with Gallup and CD and that, and just stack that game up. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with doing that in tournaments. I still might not play Davis and CEH with it, maybe pick one. Because I don't want to have 4 of the top owned players on the slate all in one team. But you don't have to, it's more about how you build your team than it is about oh my God, this one guy is super popular. But I think these wide receivers, it's getting really condensed at wide receiver. And I see this might be the weakest wide receiver pool on a slate that I can remember. And we just went through running back. How many dudes do we list that were good, flat out good plays? Kareem Hunt without Nick Chubb on most slates would be super popular, but there's 3 other awesome plays. James Robinson, David Johnson. I like Antonio Gibson. Like you said, Drake has been Drake was one of the highest owned running backs just 2 weeks ago. He was he was chopped. There's all these guys, and they're all relatively closely packed together. So I don't think if you want to go after chalkier wide receivers, I don't think that's bad. This week, I like Darius. I don't know if I'm playing him, but I like Darius Slayton. So if you want to play that, you just be mindful that you can't just jam CEH or whatever. Play James Robinson. James Robinson's 7% and CEH is 30% if you want to play Darius Slayton. You're not losing hardly any anything on your projection, and you're gaining a ton on the field. So that's just kind of how I think about the week in general, because the wide receiver chalk is pretty good. But running back, there's just a lot of plays, I think.
Yeah, and you mentioned some stuff too, just about combining the ownership and whatnot. Obviously, again, going back to the tool we talk about, we're trying to integrate all the thoughts together at one time, not just plays, but how can you put them into lineups together? What makes sense from a construction standpoint? I think everyone always goes back to at the end of a slate and said, "Man, I was on all the right guys. I just didn't get them in the right lineup." Well, that's what we're trying to talk about here. Obviously, you can use this tool to create some of that stuff. And what you mentioned was sort of a total lineup ownership. You might not want them all together. I showed you guys before to avoid all the chalk at one position, set up a group for that. But I mean, you could also set up another group and start punching in all the plays that you're seeing at the highest owned at each and separate them in that sense. If you don't want to have a lot together, I choose personally to do it by a max total ownership and might run at something like 110, 125, that range, depending on what the slate looks like and how condensed the chalk is. Because you're right. There's just so many ways that you can get different and be a little bit unique here and there. Like you said, save $100 off CEH and drop to James Robinson. It's a great situation, a great game environment. And then maybe because you do that, you decide to get a different play into your wide receiver core from that team, like a Tyreek Hill, who we mentioned. So we'll go into a wide receiver here. Maybe just talk me through some of these guys at the top that stand out to you as what you perceive to be good leverage plays, and then ways you could stack them up or get different secondary stacks, anything like that you'd apply when it comes to tournaments. Yeah,
I think that Tyreek is definitely my guy. Obviously, piggybacking on all the Chiefs talk. It's gonna be brutal for me later if like the Chiefs score like 24 points and it's 3 CEH touchdowns. But I just it's just the same thing. I really want to get in on that passing game. It's great leverage, and leverage for leverage's sake is something I think people bring up a little bit too much. But in this particular instance with the Chiefs, with CH being the highest or one of the highest owned players on the slate, and then the leverage is Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill. You're not playing, Devonta Freeman is leverage, right? And I actually like that leverage maybe more than I should, but it's not quite as fun of leverage, right? Freeman, you need to just draw to some touchdowns, basically. Playing Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill as leverage is like a tournament player's dream, right? Tyreek gets 2 80-yard touchdowns in the first quarter. Devonta Freeman's not running 2 80-yard touchdowns, period. So that's just kind of, a spot that I really want to kind of draw my line in the sand and get on. I'm interested in Calvin Ridley because I just feel like he's not going to be as owned as he probably should be without Julio, and he's not going to be low by any stretch. But I just think roster construction leads you away from him. It leads you to those Panthers wide receivers, and it leads you to Zacchaeus, as your Falcon guy. So I think avoid, another way to stack a chalky game, that game is just don't use Zacchaeus. Stack that game without Zacchaeus, or maybe play Curtis Samuel over Robbie or something like that. Play Hayden Hurst. They're the same thing. There's ways to play that game that I think are really, really interesting for tournaments. To use some of these use Antonio Gibson, use Devonta Freeman or whatever at running back to get you Calvin Ridley instead of Zacchaeus. You're really not losing anything upside. You might be gaining it actually. So Ridley is one. Tyreek. I was more into Cooper Kupp actually earlier in this week. That game looks a little sloppy with the weather, so that kind of brings me down a little bit on him. And so the other one I would say would be on with the Jags talk. I like Robinson at running back, but I really like DJ Chark too. I think he
Laviska too. I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Really. I mean that game was just like wheels up. I think now.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to have some sort of stack of that. I don't know what it is yet, and I probably want to get pieces of that on even my Chief stacks teams, whether it's Robinson or whoever. I think that is a beautiful game that, like you said it earlier, it's not off the board. It's not super low owned, but it just so happens to fall in like third or fourth in the pecking order. And these guys have as much upside as anybody. So I think that's like kind of how I want to attack it, is just not getting, I'm not playing Jets wide receivers. I'm not playing, I'm not.
You're making it easier on yourself for sure. That's the good thing.
Trust me. I have stacked Jets games probably as much, if not more than anybody over the last few years, and watched it. And it is, I've written it off finally. Now it only took me, losing God knows how much money on these bumps. So, but I just think taking a step down to just, Chark is a slightly worse play than like Gamari. Tyreek is a slightly worse play than these guys. Chenault is how much different is Chenault and Slayton? Not that much different. I think just shifting to those games a little bit is kind of how I'm approaching it.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to run back a gross set of wide receivers, you can put in Calvin Ridley off the 0. You could put in DJ Moore, who's never shown up yet, that we've been waiting for. And then you put Brandon Cooks off the 0.
Oh,
and that's, if you get that wide receiver set, that's how you win the Millie, right? You put those guys in, and then you talk about Jets receivers. What about the old Jets receiver with the chalk here, Robbie Anderson at 5.9K? Because there is a conversation around him versus DJ Moore versus both. Like, what do you do? Any love for Robbie Anderson at 23% ownership?
In a vacuum, I love Robbie Anderson. I think I see everything that you see and everybody else probably sees. The usage, the way they're using, not only just like the overall volume, the way that they're using him is awesome. I think that offense is great. I was in on that offense before the year started with Joe Brady, bringing in LSU's old pass game coordinator, Joe Brady. I think he's awesome. Yeah. I think Matt Rule is a pretty good coach. I think Teddy is better than people think. I think that offense is just a good offense. So that's actually like my toughest decision / fade on this is I really do think that game is really, really strong. So I'm trying to think that one through a lot because I really like Robbie. But the thing about Robbie is, yes, through 4 weeks, his usage and he looks like the best option in that passing game. But it's still only 4 weeks. And it doesn't mean, if Curtis Samuel, who we know is explosive with the ball in his hands, if they throw him a bubble screen and he makes 2 guys miss and runs 60 yards for a touchdown, he's a better play than Robbie. We know DJ Moore is a stud. Yes, it hasn't come through the last couple of weeks, but week 2 or whatever, he had 8 for 120 or something like that. Like there's a lot more variance in these outcomes than people think. So I'm trying to kind of really think through that game a lot, and I am super interested in it. So I'm trying to decide if it's worth it to kind of eat a little bit of chalk in that game and just deviate, with like a Curtis Samuel or something, or if you kind of get more wild at running back and use Robbie.
Yeah, we both love the game theory, optimal, and the leverage stuff. So we've talked through quite a bit of it. But just to give an idea, if you got your chalk wide receivers, there's definitely a lot more volatility here. You can use lineup HQ and do something like max them or cap them in that sense, where, like you said, you just have to be thoughtful. As you mentioned, Dinkmeyer there, you don't have to go completely off the board and be crazy with it and say, okay, I'm just fading the top 3 and hope for the best. Well, that's going to be tilting when the game starts off with a bomb to Robbie Anderson and you're dead on the slate. So you don't need to go all in on him, but you don't need to go completely off him either if you don't want to. Just some of the other guys, I mentioned Watkins and Hardman. Those are going to be in those stacks. Marquise Brown with Lamar. You can use Boyd on the other side. I think that's a good one. Someone in the chat mentioned Flacco again, but, just the fact of Bell, Crowder coming back into the offense, maybe they can move it a little bit more, but that makes Hopkins at 9% ownership a great play on this slate for a guy who has a very high floor and a really high ceiling as well when he gets rolling. And we, haven't really seen that yet. We've seen some 25ers and that sort of thing, but he can get a 40 burger up at times. So with the big game with Kyler, that would be interesting. We talked earlier about these Cowboys, Lamb and Gallup, not getting a lot of love for a game environment that everyone really loves. Tate versus Slayton, that's another option. I mean, there's still no Shepard, no Barkley, obviously. So, I mean, you got options there. There's lots of these guys you can play. We'll move on to tight end just in the spirit of time, but I think the key is trying not just be all about plays, and how can you use these plays and how can you make your lineups and get them to work? What are the player groups that you can set up to make these things happen and use your stacks tool and that to go into it? But let's move to tight end. We'll do maybe 5 minutes here. Just give me your 3 favorite tight ends and why. And just, again, if anything is related to how you could use them to be different and within lineup HQ.
Yeah, definitely now, especially with some of this news, my 3 favorite tight ends would be Kelsey, Waller, and Fells. Obviously, those are the tight ends from probably my 2 favorite games. I think it's a rare. It's a lot of the times really, really hard to play Tyreek and Mahomes, Tyreek, and Kelsey. It's usually too cost prohibitive or just limiting the overall upside of your team. I think this is a rare slate where you can do it. So, or if you want to play, say Watkins or even Hardman over Tyreek as the second Chief and use Kelsey, you can do that. There's a lot of things you can do with the Chiefs, but Kelsey, I think is just a smash play today. And I think with Kittle right there next to him, even maybe Andrews, and then like Ingram down lower, I don't think you have to be concerned at all with Kelsey's ownership. And then Waller is just, a similar thing. I love that game. everybody loves the Chiefs to score a bunch of points. Waller is their wide receiver 1, and he's going to come in lower than because we finally have all the studs on the slate. You're going to get Waller at sub 6K, like totally unowned, and assuming that they're going to be losing in the second half, which is when he just catches like 10 balls. So yeah. I really like that. And some combination of those two, in those game stacks. And then if you're looking, if you need a cheap guy, or maybe you can correlate Fells in a number of different ways. You can include him in game stacks. Say you want to play Deshaun Watson to Will Fuller and include that tight end in your game stack, or say Minshew with Chenault and Chark, and you can include Fells. I really like including your tight end in your stacks, but also, you can use him if you just need some savings there. Say you do want to play Zeke or Ridley or whatever, you can use Fells at tight end and now maybe correlate him with James Robinson or DJ Chark or Chenault or whatever. There's just a lot of ways you can go with all three of those tight ends, but especially now that we do kind of have a decent punt, I think, that opened up in Fells, that those three are definitely my favorites.
Yeah, I like Fells. I like Thomas a bit more at the same price because the fact, like I talked about, Atlanta is just getting destroyed, and it's just a funny scenario where everyone loves that game, everyone loves the spot, but he's going to be after Anderson, after Moore, after Davis. Like, it's just hard he's like the fourth option in there, maybe the fifth if people are moving to Samuel now. So it's crazy to think that for the opportunity. I definitely am not saying he's going to score 3 touchdowns like Tanyan did, but guys have been lighting them up, and I think it's a good spot that you can see it. Ian Thomas has the ability. So, and if Teddy's looking to check it down to him, that's an option. I think you mentioned a couple things that stand out. I like Ingram. I like Kelsey. I like Waller, Schultz in those game stacks. But like Ingram with Slayton, with Jones, with Zeke, I don't see that winning you a tournament. It's just too much of the same guys together, as we talked about. So maybe you go Tate and then use Lamb or Gallup on the other side. You just talked about it. Watson, Fuller, decently popular. It's not going to be crazy like some of these other stacks, but it'll be popular. But why not throw Fells in? If they're going to score points, you can have Chark, you can have Chenault, you can have both. You can have whatever you want to set that game up like on the other side, as long as you're putting Fells in with Watson and Fuller. So that's another way to go about it. Now, 4 or 5 minutes left here, Eric. I thought we'd just run back through maybe some of the questions that have popped up, rapid fire. You can answer them, throw your thoughts. Always selling. What about Brandon Cooks or Cobb for that same Houston stack we just talked about?
So this is like definitely a struggle of mine. Like, watching those guys, like I watch a lot of the games. I watch, I hashtag watch the tape, right? Like, it's like that's my struggle with those. Like, if you just don't think about who they are as a player, whatever, and you think about leverage and just general, GPP theory and stacking and stuff, I think that those guys make sense. I can't do it because I didn't even like Brandon Cooks last week, and then he airballed, and so now you puff your chest out and you feel like, oh, you idiots, you played 30% Brandon Cooks or whatever. Like I think if I'm Tambo playing 150, I'm not excluding them. Let's just say that much.
That's like we said, how you get different within a game. If it's a popular game, you need to find ways to get different. That's why Devontae Freeman's in the mix. That's why Gurley is getting into the conversation and using Josh Jacobs when they should be down. That means there's no way he can get there. These are great plays. They're just not in what is perceived to be the best spot. And so I definitely like that, and I'll have some Cooks. What about another conversation here is a good one, I think. Devontae Parker, wide receiver 1, pretty cheap, not a lot of love, decent game. What's your thoughts on Devontae Parker there?
I like Devontae Parker. I don't see how the 49ers don't score a bunch of points here. I mean, I just really don't see how they don't, kind of have their way with the Dolphins defense. And I mean, we've seen, I guess people weren't necessarily buying it as much. The Dolphins have Preston and Gesicki and whatever, but Devontae is very clearly the alpha there. And we don't have a ton of like true alphas on this slate. So whether you whether you're stacking that game or say you're playing Kittle, maybe you're playing Kittle.
I love that secondary stack for when I am using Kittle, because I've been low on him all week. There was some numbers out. Head Chopper and I talked about it last week on the premium Sunday Night Football show. And we talked about it again on the Tourney Takes pod this week around the Mullins numbers for Kittle was a thing. Even in 2018, he was averaging 100 yards a game with Mullins. Not saying he can't do that. It's Kittle. This is a yards after catch monster. This guy can break a slate down in an instant. But for me, it's just the other plays around it. And if I'm going to pick one, he's got ownership too. So it's not it's sort of not like I'm getting a super leverage anywhere else. I'm just going with the guy I'd rather play. Another one, I guess I'm going to lump these ones together in the spirit of time. So there's Zacchaeus, there's Cedric Wilson, there's Jeff Smith, all these 3K guys. What's your rankings on them, and where are you at on the Wizard of Oz, sitting there with now no Julio?
I don't want to play any of these fucking guys. That's like my general stance. I think Zacchaeus. So if I'm playing Zacchaeus, in my opinion, you need to be stacking up that game. You can't be using him in like if you're stacking the Chiefs and you just need some cheap guy, you can't be doing that, because that's what everybody that needs the 3K guy in their filler lineups of their, or they stack the Cowboys, they're using him. Don't use him there. But if you want to play Matt Ryan and Ridley and Zacchaeus and maybe you're playing Ian Thomas as you're loading up on that game, and that's where you use Ian Thomas. Well, nobody's having Zacchaeus and Ian Thomas. So I would just, again, be really thoughtful about how I use Zacchaeus. And Jeff Smith, I think, is at least mildly interesting because he's going to be significantly lower owned than Zacchaeus. And if you do something like Kyler to Nuke with Jeff Smith coming back, no one is playing that, and it's no worse of a stack than anything else. So that's Cedric Wilson, not for me.
Yeah, I'm with you on all those. Again, appreciate you coming on with me, man. Thanks to everybody for all the questions in the chat. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, get the $5 off. You don't have access to this stuff every week. This is, like I said, the last sort of cherry on top, but the rest is still there for you guys. Other than that, thank you and good luck.
Back into Fantasy Bar, 6 of my favorite plays for Week 5 on FanDuel and DraftKings, including my favorite game I'm going to be attacking. What low-price tight end I think has huge upside here? A wide receiver that's been burning people that we're going to go back to, and a couple running backs I think are in tremendous spots. Ownership shouldn't be too bad. Who are we talking about? Belly up to the Fantasy Bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 5 edition Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack. Good to be back here once again in the friendly confines of the Fantasy Bar, talking DraftKings and FanDuel. Thank you, as always, for stopping by here, guys. Now, before we get into the plays, we're going to take a quick look back at Week 4. We're going to continue to add these recaps in on every video to see how we did the previous week. And last week, it was all right. Not our best week, not our worst week. Had a couple hits. The Miami connection was good to us. Obviously, Dalvin Cook in that B spot as a pivot off of some of the chalkier running backs, but big disappointments with Darrell Henderson and Brandon Cooks giving us the bagel last week in a good matchup. Hawkinson found the end zone. He was all right. All in all, an okay week, but we aim to do better here. So let's do that. Before we get into this week, guys, do me a favor. Click that thumbs up button on YouTube. Really helps us out. Means a lot to me. I greatly appreciate it. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Get notified when these videos are coming out right to your inbox. All right, let's talk some Week 5. Let's talk FanDuel and DraftKings. Let's start at the wide receiver position this week with DJ Moore of the Panthers. So DJ Moore, a guy that's burned a lot of you out there. I realize that. A guy that's been heavily owned each and every week while Robbie Anderson continues to put up stats. But I think there's room for both of these guys to do some damage here this week against Atlanta. The thing is with DJ Moore this week, the ownership doesn't look like it's going to be from previous weeks. And we've seen him get 25% ownership in a lot of these big tournaments, upwards of 30%. I think people are finally frustrated with DJ Moore. Now's the time I want to jump on board here when he's going to be around 10% owned in this matchup. We talked about Atlanta, bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed, 2 wide receivers, massive total in this game. It's going to be a game a lot of people attack, no doubt. But when people bailing on DJ Moore, now's the time you're going to get heavier ownership on Robbie Anderson. You're going to see a very highly owned Mike Davis. This gives us a pivot off of some of that ownership, leverage off of some of that ownership, and still give us access to one of the higher total games on the slate. DJ Moore, the yards have been there, the touchdowns are coming. Let's get him in those lineups here. in week 5. All right, moving on. Next pick for us. Let's go to running back. We're going to go with the stud, high-range guys. We're going to go with James Conner of the Steelers. So a lot of chalk developing at this position. As of this recording, looks like guys like Zeke, Mike Davis, like we mentioned, going to be very, very highly owning, and they're in great spots, no doubt. Not all chalk is bad, but we can pivot off of some of that, find that leverage. I think James Conner, one of those guys. So let's check the boxes here. Let's take a look at James Conner. First of all, home favorites, which is where we like our running backs. About a 7-point home favorite here against Philadelphia. Very advantageous. Think about it. Teams playing with the lead. Running back's going to get more work, and we know the Steelers love to use a workhorse running back, and they have done that with James Conner. Been productive here over the last couple games. We had that hiccup in week 1, the injury, but since then, the last 2 games, this guy's averaging over 25 DraftKings points a game. So we're talking about an easy 3 to 4x return on this salary. That's tournament winning stuff right there. That's a cash game lock right there at these price points. And the Philadelphia defense, not been great. Middle of the road against running backs. Those numbers look all right, but they're giving up a lot of points, 20 or more points scored in every single game against this defense. So add it all up, I think the receiver is going to be popular here in this game. I want to go with the running attack here and roll with James Conner this week under 7K on DraftKings against the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, let's go to the tight end position. Another spot, I think you're going to see a lot of popular plays like Evan Ingram. Let's go to the other side of that game and roll with Cowboys tight end Dalton Schultz. So Schultz kind of the forgotten man here. We got Amari Cooper, we got CeeDee Lamb, you have Zeke catching balls, we have Michael Gallup appearing here and there. And we all thought it was going to be Blake Jarwin putting big numbers up for this offense, but Dalton Schultz has stepped in and really hasn't skipped a beat here. Let's take a look at some of his numbers. Averaging 8 targets per game, and we're talking about 8 targets from a tight end at these prices, 4,800 on DraftKings, just 5,300 on FanDuel. Ownership looks like it's going to be very minimal. We know this is a game people are going to stack every which way with Dak, the receivers, Zeke, Daniel Jones, all these guys on the other side. Well, Dalton Schultz, kind of similar to DJ Moore, going to be the guy that really nobody uses. I mean, he's going to have some ownership for sure, but I think he'll be under 10% ownership, and it gives you access not only to this game, but to this Dallas Cowboys offense that continues to put up a ton of points, and they've always heavily utilized a tight end, and we've seen that. Schultz been getting a ton of use in this offense. Not only that, but the Giants. We know the defense not very good, especially against the pass. 24th in DVOA this season are the Giants against the pass. So we know this game will be a shootout. We know it'll be heavily owned, but I think Dalton Schultz will fall through the cracks here. I think he's cash game playable, but love the upside here in tournaments against the New York Giants. All right, back to the running back position. Our next play for us, James Robinson of the Jaguars. Now, kind of counterintuitive here. We talked about being a home favorite, a good spot for a running back, but we also want volume with our running back, and that's certainly what we've gotten out of James Robinson. We're talking about a guy averaging almost 20 touches per game and over 23 DraftKings points a game over the last 3. The matchup couldn't be any better here. Week in, week out, we've seen running backs trample this Houston Texans team. Last week, Dalvin Cook did it for us in that Beast of the Week spot, but we've had guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire go nuts against this team. And I think James Robinson going to be the next guy to tear this defense up. As you would guess, you're bad in DVOA. That means you're bad in giving up fantasy points, 3rd most fantasy points allowed to the running back position. So Robinson getting a ton of work here. Price is still fair, under 7K. Touches the ball on the ground, through the air. This game could shoot out. I love this game. But the main guy I like here from the Jacksonville side, definitely James Robinson here in a great matchup with the Houston Texans. All right, let's go to the other side of that game. You guys are not going to like this, but we are going to try it again. We're going to go back to the well here on wide receiver, Brandon Cooks. Now, I know you're turning off the video right now. You're saying, what in the hell are we doing here? Just hear me out here. And you don't have to play Brandon Cooks, guys. And that's the beauty of this video. These are guys that I'm going to play. These are guys going to be in my lineup, guys that I'm suggesting. You don't have to go there, but definitely disappointed us last week. Was in a great spot against Minnesota. Kind of like when you go grab that beer and it's skunked, you pour it down the drain, you move on. What do? You grab the next beer, and it may be the same one that you tried before, and it may be even better, maybe a little bit fresher. And I think that's what we get here out of Brandon Cooks. Plus, we're getting that beer, aka Brandon Cooks, at an even cheaper price tag this week at just $4,100. So let's take a look at some of the numbers and why I'm going back to Brandon Cooks. Led all Houston receivers, and we saw Kenny Stills have a decent game. Will Fuller have a big game. Randall Cobb's there. I know it's a wide receiver room filled with a lot of guys here, but this guy led them in both snaps and routes run in week 3. The Vikings seem to go out of their way to take him out of the game and succeeded. We've seen some games out of this guy where he's had some big games. And the main thing here is ownership. At 4,500 last week, he stuck out to a lot of people, including myself. We talked about him in the video, but you're going to go from that 25, 30% ownership to under 10%, maybe even 5% here. This is one of those plays in tournaments. You don't have to go there in cash games, although he is cheap enough on DraftKings to take a shot here against this terrible Jags defense. But these are the kind of plays. Don't hold it against them. Don't hold it against me. I feel bad you got a 0. I got a ton of zeros across my lineup. The point is, I'm going right back to this play here. Better setup here than last week against Minnesota. Way less ownership, a cheaper price. Enough said. We're going back to the well here on Brandon Cooks. All right, it's time to take a look at my favorite play here for week 5. But
Hey guys, what is up? Welcome to Crunch Time. It is a glorious day. It's not only football Sunday, but we've got NBA finals. We've got some good baseball going on. It's just an awesome sports day all around. Of course, we are here to talk some football, and we are joined by two very clever football minds. One, we have Christy Metzger with us. Hey, Christy.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. I'm kind of pumped up for this because generally I don't look at anything, and then you guys tell me what to do, and I try to make money in the last 30 minutes. That's the beauty of the show. So hopefully you've got some good plays for us.
Absolutely. I really like the slate this week, and I think there's a lot of good plays and a lot of plays to differentiate yourselves too. So it's gonna be good.
Feeling that confidence. I love it. We got Tuttle as well. What's up, man? How are you?
Yeah, I think we're just gonna let Christy do all the talking because I don't have that confidence on this slate.
Really?
So we'll just let her answer everything, and I'll just sit here and scroll on the lineup HQ throughout the show.
It's always a little weird when you feel good about a slate because then probably everyone else does too. And when you feel bad about it, then also like everyone else is struggling. So I don't know. But Christy, you think you have you're ready to attack this slate?
Yeah, I do. I think there's a lot of different angles to attack it, and I feel like I've got maybe a core group this week, so of players that I like. So yeah, I'm ready to dive in.
Okay, that sounds great. Najee the God saying, at least Gronk isn't on the main slate this time. That's a good point. I keep burning with Gronk. Never again. Don't do it, Kevin. Let's go ahead and talk about some of these plays, Christy, and I will let you lead us off, and we'll start talking about some quarterbacks.
Yeah, for quarterbacks, I find myself.
Wait, can I cut you off? I know I just gave you the green light.
Unbelievable.
I know. I'm the worst host ever. I should add that there's some weather before we get into all the plays. It is going to rain in Washington. That's kind of the main rain game. It's also going to rain in Baltimore, but that might hold off until the second half. But Washington's really the game where I'm like, it's just kind of ugly there. Generally, if it's raining, but it's not windy, which is the case today, I don't really care that much because the offense and the defense has to run in the slick ground. But just to note that it is raining in Washington, which in my mind, slight little bump down to passing, slight little bump up to the defense. That's it. Christy, do you have any thoughts on that before you tell us about quarterbacks? Are you like, Kevin, I don't care about weather at all? You're allowed to have that take.
No, I do. I mean, obviously it can definitely impact, especially if you have quarterbacks or such from those games too. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
Okay. Now go ahead and talk about some quarterbacks. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So for quarterbacks this week, I find myself using like more of a core group. I really like Deshaun Watson. I think, with a new coaching change this week, I think he's set up for a prime opportunity. Going against the Jags. I look to see him having a big game this week. But I also like some guys at the top too. I like Mahomes a ton. I like that Kansas City game a lot. I think he's going to have to throw it a lot. I also like the running game there. but Mahomes, I think, makes a fantastic play. Do have interest in Lamar Jackson and Prescott. Again, those are, kind of 4 plays at the top, but a couple that I'm looking to that I've kind of found later on in the week. One that I like is Burrow, and he's pretty cheap. I do like that game a little bit and think it can have some sneaky upside there. So he's one that I'm looking if you're looking to save some funds. And then I also think Kyler Murray is going to get overlooked too. And he definitely puts up the points, and, he and Hopkins together make a ton of sense. Now's the week to play him, especially when there's just not going to be a lot of people on him.
Okay, excellent. Tuttle, you got anything different there?
Yeah, not a whole bunch. I think Deshaun Watson is probably going to come in as the chalk cash game quarterback. And I was a little hesitant about that to start the week, but we got news today that confirming that Jacksonville is going to be without 3 of their top defenders: Miles Jack, C.J. Henderson. Forget the last person, but yeah, I mean it's a really good spot for Deshaun Watson. I mean, it's going to be the same play calling that he's had the first 3 weeks, and Romeo Crennel is taking over at head coach. And it's not like he's some innovative guy. He's a 73-year-old dude that's been around the league forever. So I do think there's ways for it to fail. But the added defense out for me is kind of pushing me over the edge to Watson in cash games. And either spend up options are fine for tournaments. I think somebody that will be fairly popular that is the inexpensive play is Daniel Jones. He has not accounted for a touchdown since week 1, so it's a little bit scary. But the Dallas defense has been terrible this season. Jones has provided at least somewhat of a floor with his rushing ability. He's still he's still getting double-digit fantasy points each week without scoring a touchdown. So if he does get some regression in terms of touchdown regression, then it could be a decent play. And I think he's a fine kind of cheap guy. And then I also think both quarterbacks in the Carolina-Atlanta game are fine. I think Matt Ryan of that game will be the lower-owned quarterback between Matt Ryan and Teddy Bridgewater. But I think you can stack him up with Calvin Ridley. You can stack him up with Russell Gage or Zacchaeus as well. So I do like both quarterbacks in that game as well for tournaments.
Okay. Why don't you bring us to running back, and, you can kind of give us a broad brush here. You paying up? You like some cheapies? What are you thinking?
Yeah, so running back, I think it's actually a pretty clear 4-player pool on both sites, really, with Zeke, Mike Davis, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Kareem Hunt. I think on draft or on FanDuel, you could probably throw James Robinson into the equation just because he's so cheap there. So you could make it kind of a 5-person player pool. But I do think those will be the chalkiest running backs on the slate. And I think rightfully so. I think they're all tremendous plays. I think the biggest decision, on FanDuel specifically, and we'll probably get a lot of questions in this manner later, is if we want to play Clyde Edwards-Helaire with a receiver, or do we want to play Kareem Hunt with a different receiver? I think that's where we're going to get a lot of questions later on. I personally like the Helaire side just a little bit more than Hunt. I think Hunt is in a spot to play more snaps this week, obviously with Nick Chubb out. He didn't see much of an expanded role last week, but he did go into that week with a groin injury. He's had a week to rest that. I think that's the only hesitancy you could have if you want to try to play an angle that maybe Hunt's not some tremendous option, is that you think he's still semi-injured with that groin injury. But I don't think there's a whole lot of reason to believe that. So I think Hunt's a great play in all formats this week, and he's a fringe cash game play if you can make it work. As far as tournaments options, things actually fall off pretty quickly. And so I do think keeping a tight pool is fine, even though those running backs I mentioned are going to be the chalky running backs. I do think keeping a tight pool is fine. But if you're expanding it, somebody like James Conner is okay. Somebody like David Johnson is fine. David Johnson is especially a pretty strong leverage play off that Houston passing attack. Mentioned that I think Deshaun Watson's going to be one of the chalkier quarterbacks on the slate. So if you kind of wanted to find leverage off that in tournaments, I think David Johnson is a strong tournament option.
Okay, Christy, Tuttle sounds like he is eating all of the chalk at running back there. With that 4-player pool, do you want to expand that, or is that where you're at too?
I think he's really spot on. That's exactly kind of how I broke down the running back slate this week. I think they're all tremendous plays. I know he just touched on James Conner. I actually really like him a lot as a GPP play this week. I have a ton of interest in the Pittsburgh defense. Expect them to have a lead. I like pairing my defense with the running back. And so I'm probably overweight the field on Connor. He wasn't getting a lot of traction to start the week, but I think he's a really great play. He's $7K on FanDuel, so I think he makes a great pivot away from Hunt. He's a little bit more expensive, $6,900 on DK, but I think he's a great play. And I too think David Johnson is in a really good spot too. Robinson is very cheap. And so he's a good pivot there and gives you some more exposure to that Houston game. But, I'm kind of just like Tuttle, where I, kind of have a pretty small group of running backs that I'm looking to go to this week.
Okay, well, I feel like everyone we've talked about has not been cheap, or at least the vast majority of these good plays, which means I assume at wide receiver, we're going to find some cheapies to plug in. But Christy, I'll let you start at the top and kind of work your way down, or however you want to do it. But let's talk receiver.
Yeah. So for receiver, I definitely think there is an opportunity to save some money here, because obviously we're spending up a little bit more on some of those high price guys on running back. Obviously we have interest in the Houston game. I think Fuller is going to be a very popular play this week. He's been doing great. We saw Cook's bust last week, and so Fuller was getting a lot of opportunities, and he actually had a touchdown that was taken off the board, so could have had even more points. So I definitely think that he is going to be a popular play, and I think he makes a great one in cash and tournaments. I will also say, I think Ridley at the high end, if you're going high end, I think both he and Tyreek Hill are very good plays. But again, if we're kind of looking in that mid tier, I think, Fuller, I think Robbie Anderson is a great play. And then Marquise Brown, I think he's had a ton of air yards. He's had a ton of opportunities. It feels like he's on the verge of a breakout week. Having interest in Lamar Jackson, I think it's great to pair him with Brown. Have some interest in Shark, going back to that Houston Jags game. I think, if you're getting Fuller and Watson in there, I think it, makes a lot of sense to bring Shark in there as well. So those are a few of the guys that I guess I'm looking at wide receiver.
We got to go cheaper, right? I just feel like there's been nobody that we haven't had a 3 or a 4K play yet.
I should say, so Zacchaeus for Atlanta, he's min price on DK. He's $4,800 on FanDuel. Now that we have word that Julio Jones is out, he's, he should get a lot of traction today. I think he makes a ton of sense. I think he's going to be extremely popular on DraftKings. He really makes a lot of things work. So I think he's the cheap guy that really allows you to get a lot of those high price plays in.
Okay. Tuttle, thoughts at receiver?
Yeah, she nailed it with Zacchaeus. I think he's going to be the chalky cheap guy on DraftKings specifically. You don't really have to go there on FanDuel because they have so many other cheap guys.
On Zacchaeus, how much of Zacchaeus do you both have in your tournament lineups here?
I actually think he's a good tournament fade, because I do think he's going to be chalky, and there's plenty.
So that's
of
what I was curious about.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I would definitely agree with that.
Okay, interesting. All right, Tuttle, keep going.
Yeah. So I mentioned kind of getting on Houston a little bit later in the season. Nobody's going to want to do it, but Brandon Cooks, I think, is 100% in play on DraftKings at 4,100. I know multiple high stakes players that are putting a lot of money down on him in their cash game lineups. So people won't want to call him a cash game option, and I understand why. But 4,100 doesn't typically buy you, a player that's going to run 95% of the team routes. He's going to be on the field. He's going to be on an offense that's going to score. So I get the thesis behind the play. It's just, you got to have short memory with DFS, and people aren't going to go back to that well this week. But I do think he's a pretty strong play. If you have the little extra money on DraftKings to get up to Darius Slayton at 4,800, he's going to be another relatively chalky play, and I do think he is a good option as well. Again, going up against Dallas is a really good matchup for him. So I'm fine with Slayton as well. On FanDuel, I think there's a decision that you have to make between Darius Slayton and Deontay Johnson. I slightly prefer Deontay Johnson over Darius Slayton, but I don't have a strong lean either way on that one. But I do think there's going to be a lot of lineups that kind of come down to that final 5,800 spot on FanDuel. And again, if you're picking between the two, I do have a slight lean to Deontay Johnson. I guess you can throw CeeDee Lamb into that conversation on FanDuel as well. He's actually projecting a little bit better than the other two I mentioned, and CeeDee Lamb's only 5,900. But I still rank Lamb behind the other three. So he would be the third guy that I would rank on FanDuel. My personal rankings would be Deontay Johnson, then Darius Slayton, and then CeeDee Lamb in that mid-tier range on FanDuel.
Okay, let's talk about tight end.
Yeah, so tight end, we finally get a slate where we have actually good tight ends to play. So that makes it interesting. A lot of these weeks we've had, Travis Kelce, George Kittle on primetime games, so they haven't been on the main slate, but we get both of them on this slate. We get Mark Andrews on the slate as well. FanDuel, I think it's a little bit easier. Again, FanDuel typically always has a fairly soft salary cap, and it is pretty negligible to fit George Kittle into your lineups there. He stands out as the underpriced option of the top tier guys on FanDuel. So George Kittle is the guy that I'm targeting most on FanDuel. On DraftKings, of the high-priced guys, I do prefer Kittle if you can get him, but Kelce is $200 cheaper. And then I also think Evan Ingram is in play on both sites as well as kind of that lower-priced option. He's not extremely low-priced on DraftKings, though, so he only kind of fits some builds. He's kind of in that awkward pricing range where I think he's a fine play, but I don't think he's an awesome play. But I do think he's in play on DraftKings and FanDuel as well. He's only $5,500 on FanDuel. I think in cash games, you do want to get up to Kittle and FanDuel, though. But if you are convinced on spending that $1,600 elsewhere, then I do think Evan Ingram is a fine kind of salary relief option there.
Christy, tight end?
Yeah, I definitely like the same guys. I think, Kittle, like you said, on FanDuel, Kelce on DK. It's nice to have some high price options. And then I agree, too. I think Ingram makes a ton of sense. I'll throw another one out there, too. The more I kind of looked into his matchup this week, I think Eric Ebron makes a really sneaky play. Both on DK. I think he's 4K on DK and 5,200 or 5,100 on FanDuel. But, well, he's in a great matchup. And last week, Kittle just absolutely destroyed Philadelphia. And so I think, he's a guy that no one's really going to be on. So I've got a bit of him in some of my tournament lineups, but definitely agree that we've got some high price guys, and it's nice to, especially on FanDuel, like you said, to try to get up to Kittle because of the softer pricing.
Okay. Then we get to talk defense. Christy, you can lead us off there.
Yeah, for defense, it feels like I have a small group of defensive plays that I like this week too. I mentioned, I really like James Conner. So I've got a lot of Steelers defense, on both sides. I think they make a great play. I think the Cowboys defense, as much as I, hate to play them and they have not been great, they do have a good matchup. And because of their price, I think specifically on FanDuel, if you needed to punt, you could definitely do that. But, if you're looking at the top, Rams, Steelers, Ravens, even the 49ers, those are some good plays. And like on DraftKings, if you're looking to save some money too, I think the Texans are definitely in a good spot, or even a team like the Browns if you're pairing them with Kareem Hunt.
All right, total defense.
Yeah, I mean, on FanDuel, I think it's pretty easy to get the Steelers defense, and I do think they're the top overall defense on the slate. So I think they're the defense I want to side with. I will note, you do not play guys because of this, but it's really fun when you get a return touchdown and you have their defense, and Deontay Johnson is the punt returner for the Steelers. So that's a little fun. Again, it's very negligible that you shouldn't really account for it when you're building your lineups, but it is a fun little stack to do if you're just kind of, playing around with some lineups. So I do like the Deontay Johnson Steelers. It's very, very small correlation play. And then it's pretty much everybody else Chris you mentioned. I think on DraftKings, if you're trying to find a cheap defense, you probably have to go Cleveland Browns. They're 2,700. They're the most comfortable defense I have on DraftKings under that 3K mark, but I don't mind spending up if you can.
Okay. Let's talk about stacks here. And I don't want the stack that everybody's doing. Forget that stack. I want the sneaky stack. So Tuttle, what's the stack? What's your favorite stack that not the entire world is?
Man, this is why I don't have a lot of confidence this week, is because I don't have a sneaky stack. Like last week, I liked the Lions. It kind of fizzled out after a hot start. This week, I like the chalk. I do like the chalk. If I had to go with a stack.
Well, what's the chalk first? I guess we should start.
Chalk's there. Carolina, Atlanta. Chalk's probably now Houston. I will say, though, if you add Brandon Cooks as part of a kind of a double stack with Deshaun Watson, I think that's going to get you a little bit more of a unique lineup, and you can run it back with DJ Shark or James Robinson. That's my favorite stack, is that Houston double stack with Fuller and Cooks. Honestly, as crazy as it sounds, if you were looking for like a sneaky stack, I do think some of the more expensive stacks could be a little bit lower owned. So that's looking at like a Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. I think a lot of people will be on the running back there with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So you might find yourself in a spot where Mahomes comes in a little bit lower owned, Mahomes and Tyreek Hill type of thing. I know that's not going out on the ledge with anything crazy, but you could see a little bit of an ownership discount on them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If you can get the best quarterback in the NFL or one of the best quarterbacks at suppressed ownership, that's always a good thing.
Yeah, we have him. Yeah. Let's see what we have him. We have him projected at 9% ownership on DraftKings. So that comes in as the 5th highest owned quarterback on DK.
Yeah. Christy, what are you looking at as far as stacks here?
Yeah. So I would say at the top, just like Tuttle mentioned, I'm really high on Kansas City this week. And so, if Mahomes and, like Tyreek Hill and some of those guys, I think they're going to come in a little bit under-owned because there's a lot of obvious chalk that leads you to some of those Houston plays. So I'm putting quite a few of my GPP lineups together with the Kansas City game there, just because there's so many different combinations that can hit. And I also think you can put 3-4 guys in there. You can put Mahomes, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Tyreek Hill, even Kelsey. I mean, you can really stack that game up because they can really produce. So definitely like that. I had mentioned a little bit earlier, as the week went on, as I was building some just for, for some larger GPPs, I should say, Cincinnati and Burrow, I kind of found myself building some stacks with him, bringing it back with some of the Baltimore players I like, and I'm still able to get in some of the higher priced guys like Zeke and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and things like that. So that one I like as a really sneaky stack, but I do think Kansas City is going to be one of the better stacks on the day.
Okay, great. With that, I think we can get into some questions. We've got plenty of them lined up, and we've got 10 minutes to get it done. So let's dive in. I will start with the question directed at me, because that's always fun. JG4 says, hey, Roth, are you worried about QBs and wide receivers for Seattle versus Vikings tonight with the weather? It is going to rain in Seattle. I didn't talk about that. I am not worried. Someone slid into the DMs and said, should I bench Russell Wilson in my season long for the weather? And my head exploded. No, absolutely no. The only time I really worry about offense is if there's a 20-mile-per-hour wind or stronger. That's when I really get scared. If it's going to be pouring rain, yes, that will be a problem. But we're not sure that's the case yet. It's probably going to be off and on rain. Long story short, you get maybe 95% of what you would have gotten if it wasn't raining. So no, I'm not that concerned about it. On to some other questions here. Juicy J, from 3-6 Mafia. Juicy J says DK Cash 3v3. We'll give this one to Tuttle. He's a 3-6 Mafia fan. Bridgewater, Slate, and Kittle, or Ingram, Deontay Johnson, and Watson.
Give it to me one more time.
It is Bridgewater, Slayton, Kittle, or Ingram, Deontay Johnson, Watson.
I'll go number 2.
Okay. Also, I'm seeing that question was actually from 8 a.m, so Juicy J is probably not still in the chat. We'll scroll down. Juicy. We'll see. We'll scroll down a little bit. We'll go to D Gold, Lamb, or Slayton in FanDuel Cash, Christy.
I would actually rather have Lamb on FanDuel.
Okay. Cholt says DKGPP. Any interest in Freeman?
He's the leverage play if he can stomach it. I mean, he was trending in the right direction last week in terms of snap counts and touch counts. He was running routes, catching passes. It's ugly, but yeah, if you can stomach it, go for it.
Okay. We'll go to Stan. This is a 3v3 for you, Christy. DKGPP, your specialty. Do you want Gage, DJ, and the Texans D, or Zacchaeus, CEH, and the Chiefs?
I'd go the second one.
Okay, excellent. Fit Crooks says DK Cash 4v4. 4v4. Why don't you just put your whole damn all right, we'll do it. 4v4. You ready, Tuttle?
Let's do it.
All right. Bridgewater, DJ Moore, Zacchaeus, and Ingram, or Daniel Jones, Robbie Anderson, Slayton, and Fells.
I think that's number 1.
Numero uno. You like Bridgewater, DJ Moore, Zacchaeus, and Ingram.
I like Ingram a lot, which kind of sways it for me.
Okay, there you have it. Generic says, would you pivot off of Hill and Ingram in FanDuel Cash, Christy?
Pivot off of Hill and Ingram. Yeah, I probably would. I think there's some other cash game options that are available that, yeah, those are probably more tournament plays.
Okay, great. Also, by the way, I'm taking some questions in the YouTube channel. If you want to be a part of this all the time, we got a discount going on, by the way, to sign up for premium Rotogrinders. You get access to all kinds of great stuff. 6 minutes left, so get into these questions. David Lynch says, DK Cash, Dak and Robbie Anderson or Bridgewater and Ridley?
I'll go Dak and Robbie.
All right. Andre says, Carr and Waller, then run it back with a Chief should be low owned, or Minshew and a receiver run it back with a Texan.
Yes. What was the first one again? It was
Carr and Waller and run it back with a Chief, or Minshew and a receiver and run it back with a Texan.
Yeah, I'd probably say the second one, just because I do think there's going to be a lot of points scored in that game.
Right. All right. Scrolling down a little bit. We got roughly 5 minutes. Still plenty of questions coming up. We'll go to Gregorius the Wise. DK Cash question for you, Tuttle. Watson and the Steelers D or Lamar Jackson and the Browns?
I'll go Watson Steelers.
All right. Stan, DKGPP question. Did we not just do this? We did. We just did this one. Gage DJ Texans versus Zacchaeus CEH and Chiefs. And I think I don't remember. Did we not do that one? Did I make that up? Now we're doing it. Christy, okay. Gage, DJ, and Texans, or Zacchaeus, CEH, and Chiefs?
I would say the second one with Chiefs.
Okay, there we go. New York Jets says, hey, is it viable to double up at tight end? I always want to do this. I always want to do it. Waller and Kittle with one in the flex in a FanDuel single entry GPP. Tuttle?
I mean, it'll be unique. It's not the highest probability play, but if you're fine.
But it's dumb, right? It's a dumb move in general.
I mean, it's a little bit different just because we actually have tight ends that are going to see volume on this slate. Okay. You know, most slates where you're not looking at guys that are going to get 10 targets or whatever, then yeah, you don't do it. It's not the worst thing in the world.
Christy, what percentage running back do you have in your flex? I worded that poorly, but hopefully you understand my question.
The majority, I would say, for this week.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think I have 100%.
100% running back in the flex. Tuttle?
Yeah, it's all running back.
Why do I suck? This is why I suck. I have all right. I need to learn from you guys. I running backs are always so expensive. I can't get another one. Flores Mark, how confident are you in playing Mostert or just play McKinnon? Christy?
You know, that's interesting. We didn't really talk about that. I feel like if they're going to play him, I think he's a very sneaky GPP play. I mean, I think, McKinnon's a good flex play, but I wouldn't be afraid to play Mostert.
Excellent. JRC says FanDuel Cash, Slayton and CEH or Fuller and Hunt?
See, that's the question I told you we were gonna get all the questions about. I'm siding with the 5,800 in CEH side, but my 5,800 is Deontay.
Yep.
Okay, great.
I would agree with that too.
Christy, you're the same?
Yeah, I would. I know it is a tough call with Deontay, like you said, and Slayton, but I think the value with Deontay on FanDuel is better, and I lean to having him in my lineups too.
Okay. Way to anticipate the question, pre-answer it, and then answer it again. That's good work. Let's see. Yankee Blue says Watson or Lamar in cash.
I lean Watson.
Yeah. All right. BJ says DKGPP, is it wise to have a lineup that is more early slate based and fade some of those chalk late games as a GPP?
I mean, I'm not personally making decisions based on start time.
Yeah, I am. That way I can do screen.
You do see guys do that try to get the early screenshots or whatever, right. Get the juices flowing.
Right, and then you just yell, "Hold one time, one time." Let's see here. We got a couple minutes left here. All right. GWB says the Millie Maker DKGPP. Schultz or Ingram?
Ooh, they're both good plays. I'd probably lean Ingram.
And Tuttle, you're high on Ingram today, so I imagine you're Ingram as well, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Stan says DKGPP, is Daniel Jones, Zeke, and Ingram too popular? It's what I did, so probably. Am I better off going Bridgewater, Davis, Kittle?
I think it's fine to go the first one because I think there's ways to do some other one-offs in there to make your lineup a little bit unique, but I like that first one.
Great. Let's see. DKGPP, you're okay with Mostert? You both kind of agreed, like, sure, yeah, it's not a bad GPP.
Yeah, sure, why not?
1 minute left. Schultz wants a gladiator after the show locks. We can do that. That's we give him a thumbs up or thumbs down on his lineup. We can make that happen. We've actually caught up on all the questions. So if you guys have a deep strategy question that we can answer in 30 seconds, now is the time.
I'll maybe throw one more quick play out there that I forgot to mention. And T.Y. Hilton, I think he has not done anything. He's terrible down there. He's cheap.
It's really cheap.
Really want a millionaire maker play right there. He'd be a good one.
Does he do a TY when he scores a touchdown, or did I make that up? Does he do that?
No, he does.
He does. Okay. I was like, that sounds familiar. Flores, DKGPP, Dernis Johnson or Antonio Gibson?
Gibson.
Gibson.
Is it De'Aaron? Is it Dernis?
No, it's De'Ernest.
I didn't know that. Oh, all right. We're pretty much at lock by the time. There's like a few second delay. So we're calling it lock here. By the way, a couple people in the chat liking the TY call. Liking the TY.
I like it.
All right, there we go. You gotta get those to me earlier so I can win my Millie, Christy.
Well, I forgot about it actually, and I should have mentioned it earlier.
All right, let's see. We have hit the lock. We told Schultz we can do a gladiator, so go ahead. You can pop your lineup in there. I have what I do believe is the chalkiest GPP. Like, I think before the show, it was Devin, our producer, who said the lineups just kind of build themselves today. Was that Devin? Was that you?
It was.
So I just started building one, and it just felt like the chalkiest thing ever. So tell me if this is indeed the chalkiest thing to ever happen. Deshaun Watson, CEH, Zeke, Shark, Fuller, Zacchaeus, Fells, Slayton, Rams. Where are we at on the chalk level of that? Is it very, very chalky?
Yeah, it's very chalky.
It's pretty chalky. Christy, is that too chalky in a GPP? Does that just make you want to yak?
No, it doesn't. Because I think, did you say you had a different tight end? Who did you have at tight end?
Fells.
I was going to say you had a couple of unique plays in there that will make it less chalky.
Okay, great. Makes me feel a little better. I'm not drawn dead yet. We're going to get out of here in just a couple minutes. We promised Schultz we would give him one of these. By the way, guys, if you like the content here at Rotogrinders, you can sign up. You can get premium Rotogrinders, which is like this, only better. They've got even better people doing things. No, they don't have that. But we do have all kinds of other good info for you. Okay, you ready? DKGPP, thumbs up or thumbs down on this lineup. Mahomes, D. Johnson, that would be David Johnson. Robinson, Anderson, Cooper, Fuller, Thomas, Freeman, Panthers D. All right, I'm here. Overall, what, Christy, where's your thumb?
Overall, it's positive.
Christy gave the overall
down thumb. I was just kind of in the middle. I was going to say, I think it's okay.
All right. You think it's
it kind of tailed off a little bit at the end there.
Yeah, Tuttle started with a pretty high thumb, and then as it kept going, it started.
And looking further at it, not pairing Mahomes, is that correct? Is not optimal.
Naked Mahomes?
Yeah, right? Looking at it. It's hard to do it when you're, listing it along.
I know. I missed some of the plays in there. Yeah, I couldn't tell.
I would never do naked Mahomes.
Well, he'd have to run for 2 scores or just
spread it out
6
like
touchdowns
crazy.
To spread it out different people. Yeah, that's possible. All right. Well, what do you think, guys? We can either hang out here together for 30 minutes or we could go watch some football. Christy, it's your call.
Let's go watch some football.
Okay, that sounds pretty good to me. Guys, we appreciate you hanging out with us. So for Tuttle, for Christy, for Devin, always working hard behind the scenes. We appreciate you. We love you. And we'll catch you next week. You have been crunched.